Under the clear spring sky, the high school appeared poetically with cherry blossom petals softly blowing in the wind. Advancing deep into the quiet corridor, the library sign opened up a space of knowledge completely separated from the hustle and bustle outside. However, that tranquil atmosphere was quickly broken by the curious gazes and whispering of a group of schoolgirls secretly observing. The center of all attention was a tall male student, calmly leaning against the bookshelf to ponder over every page despite his somewhat casual slippers. The girls standing from afar kept praising his attractive appearance and impressive height, then took the risk of inviting each other to approach and strike up a conversation with him, while the boy still maintained an indifferent to cold expression, entirely focused on the book in his hand without paying the slightest attention to his surroundings. The girls surrounded him and curiously asked what grade he was currently in and whether he was a freshman who had just enrolled. The boy softly replied that he was already a sophomore, making the girls even more excited as they eagerly suggested exchanging Stargram accounts to follow each other. Faced with the excessive eagerness from strangers, he suddenly paused with a hesitant look as if falling into an extremely awkward situation. Finally, he could only apologize and confess that he didn't use social media at all, leaving everyone in astonishment. He gave a warm smile and gently said that even without social media accounts, they could still happily greet each other when they met. The young girl froze in surprise, her face flushing red at the elegance and delicately tactful refusal of the male student. After a few brief goodbyes, the girls left in regret, returning the library to its original quiet space. Seung-woo quietly grabbed the book he had just finished reading, preparing to return it to its exact original place on the wooden shelf as a disciplined habit. The sound of the book being placed on the shelf echoed softly, revealing a title about how attitude changes life, true to his calm lifestyle. As soon as he stepped into the corridor, he immediately became the center of all attention as friends continuously waved hello and invited him to drop by the cafeteria. In response to that enthusiasm, Seung-woo smiled friendlily and waved back at each person, not letting anyone feel ignored. Behind his back were endless praises for his gentle personality, further highlighting the image of a perfect school idol. The classroom scene gradually appeared peacefully, with the daily activities of students under the harmonious sunlight by the window. Seung-woo sat thoughtfully at his desk to focus on his work, ignoring the noise from the friend next to him who was typing continuously in a tense manner. Seung-woo was engrossed in taking notes when he suddenly paused upon hearing a soft, hesitant call from behind by a classmate. The friend scratched his head sheepishly and asked to borrow his science notebook, reasoning that he had accidentally fallen asleep halfway through the previous period. The male student remained silent and calmly searched for the notebook in his desk drawer, even as the friend beside him was still focused on typing tensely. He gently handed the notebook to his friend and reminded him to make sure to return it to him later that very same day so as not to interrupt his studies. Temporarily leaving the stifling classroom space, Seung-woo's footsteps headed straight toward the teacher's office lying silently at the end of the corridor. The accompanying friend seemed annoyed and asked if he was being too easygoing by constantly helping others like a fool. Seung-woo merely responded with an indifferent turn of his head, saying that he needed to drop by the teacher's room for a moment before the next period began. Just as he stepped inside, he received another request from a teacher to help carry the class's competency assessment papers back in preparation for grading. However, his main purpose was coming to retrieve his personal laptop, prompting the teacher to immediately recognize and call his name affectionately. With a resolute gaze hidden behind a calm exterior, Seung-woo earnestly pleaded with the teacher to allow him to leave school earlier. Serim stood in front of the teacher with a highly familiar excuse for leaving, causing the teacher to frustratingly exclaim that every week she used her period to skip class. Faced with the sarcastic question of how she was still surviving in that condition, Serim nonchalantly replied that she should have died a long time ago, leaving the angry teacher only able to warn her to watch her mouth. Unflinching, the girl immediately switched to another blatant lie that her house was on fire, making the teacher completely lose his patience and demand she find a more convincing excuse. Ignoring the shouts demanding her to come back, Serim silently walked away right in front of the silent observation of Seung-woo, who was standing waiting at the door. The teacher's furious calls of Serim's name echoed throughout the room, but the girl with pitch-black hair still brushed past Seung-woo's shoulder, like an invisible breeze. Seung-woo calmly approached and handed the document folder to the teacher, as if the dramatic argument had never even happened. The teacher sighed in exhaustion and told him to quickly head back to class, receiving a polite word of thanks from the exemplary male student. He silently walked down the seemingly endless corridor to return to classroom 2-3, his hands still tightly clutching the class's stack of test papers. Just as he reached the classroom door, he unexpectedly bumped into Serim, who was quietly putting her backpack on her shoulders in preparation to leave in an utterly defiant manner. Under the afternoon sunlight, Serim's beautiful yet cold face appeared full of mystery, signaling impending troubles between two people possessing two entirely opposite extremes. Seung-woo stood silently watching Serim's back fading away in the corridor, his mind wondering about the scandalous rumors surrounding her. The fabricated stories about a highly delinquent Serim had actually begun buzzing since the very first days of the previous school year. Everything brought back memories of the bustling opening ceremony last year, when hundreds of new students were gathering in the gymnasium and constantly whispering in discussion. Serim's appearance in the classroom made her peers exclaim in astonishment that such a striking girl turned out to be in their class. While some marveled at her idol-like beauty, others felt intimidated by her razor-sharp gaze and edgy exterior. The peak of the rumors was that she was actually someone belonging to the underworld, frequently visiting dark places with rough-looking men. The information about her assaulting the elderly or chronically skipping school came with a warning that anyone who dared to mess with her would meet a tragic end. But upon entering the class to remind everyone to come get their assessment papers, Seung-woo secretly thought that all of those things were perhaps just gross exaggerations. He silently dismissed the prejudice of her being a gangster, his eyes reflecting a fierce belief that the truth of the matter was entirely far from the crowd's rumors. To him, Serim was ultimately just an ordinary student like anyone else, quietly walking in the quiet space of the sunlit corridor. Serim possessed sharp eyes and a cold aura. She seemed to always be detached from the noisy world around her. Under the brilliant cherry blossom canopy, the high school campus appeared peaceful, with groups of students pacing in preparation for the new period. Seung-woo walked while attentively checking the device in his hand, the confident and poised demeanor of an exemplary class president always evident. He gently removed his earphones, directing his observing gaze forward when he encountered an incredibly tense situation right in the middle of the school corridor. Before his eyes, a teacher was blocking Serim's path with a highly frustrated attitude, as if a fit of rage was about to be unleashed upon the rebellious girl. The teacher harshly questioned Serim about ditching school yesterday, making the girl immediately invent the excuse that her house almost caught on fire to defend herself. With an indifferent face showing no change in expression, she continued to assert that it was merely a false alarm, leaving the listeners speechless. Standing watching from behind, Seung-woo was secretly surprised to see that she could lie so smoothly without even blinking, while the teacher could only sigh helplessly and allow her to leave. Watching Serim's back slowly fading out of sight, he was suddenly called back by the teacher and asked to put his bag down to discuss some important matters together. The corridor space suddenly became unusually deserted, leaving only the tranquility enveloping the staircase and the school's water fountain area. Seung-woo suddenly received an invitation from the teacher regarding whether he was interested in participating in the academic mentoring program. She explained that the school would select the students with the poorest academic performance for the excellent students to guide and help them improve. Listening carefully to the weekly time requirements as well as the benefits of volunteer hours that would be recorded in the transcript, he thoughtfully considered it, then gave a calm smile and gently agreed to take on this significant responsibility in the face of the teacher's expectations. The early morning sunlight bathed the quiet classroom, preparing to welcome a homeroom period with important announcements from the homeroom teacher. The teacher sternly demanded that the students who still hadn't submitted the permission forms with their parents' signatures must urgently complete them right away. A few students started buzzing in discussion about forging signatures to bypass the school, while the atmosphere gradually became boisterous. Yet the center of attention was exactly Serim's blank form, as she still hadn't bothered to submit the family confirmation section. The teacher ordered Han Dong-gun to go get the form, but he immediately refused in terror and shoved that difficult responsibility onto the class president. Despite his friend worrying sick about potentially being assaulted by Serim due to the rumors of fighting, Seung-woo merely took notes silently and secretly despised those nonsense rumors. Seung-woo unexpectedly stood up and decisively asked whether he just needed to go retrieve the parent consent form and be done with it. His gaze suddenly became unusually serious as he looked toward the corner of the classroom, where Serim was withdrawing into her own space. Ignoring his friend's fearful warning to try and preserve his life to make it back, the class president silently walked away. Amidst the radiant late afternoon sunlight by the window, Serim was resting her head, sleeping soundly, looking strangely peaceful compared to the rumors. Seung-woo stepped closer, then used his fingers to lightly tap on the wooden desk surface to break the silence and wake up the girl deeply sunk in slumber. She slightly opened one eye to look at him with full hostility and annoyance at being disturbed right in the middle of her precious sleep. He did not flinch at all, but leaned down low to face her directly, creating a highly tense, confrontational atmosphere between two extremes. Serim still lazily lay flat on the desk and directed a cold, sharp gaze toward the classmate who dared to stubbornly bother her privacy. Paying no mind to her uncooperative attitude, Seung-woo started speaking up to explain the task he was carrying out in a completely calm manner. Finally, he lightly pointed a finger at his own ear and demanded she take out her music-listening device so she could seriously listen to what he was saying. Seung-woo lightly reached out a hand and decisively removed Serim's earphone, forcing her to escape her private music world to return to reality. He leaned low to face her and reminded her in a stern voice that today was the exact deadline for her to submit the parent consent form. Witnessing the class president's audacity, the peers in class could only hold their breath and sweat bullets, fearing that the rebellious girl would fly into a rage at any moment. Yet Serim merely looked up at him sluggishly with soulless eyes, her face clearly showing a reckless look as if every rule in the world was meaningless to her. Without waiting for the other party to answer, Seung-woo casually reached his hand out to rummage through the desk drawer to find the discarded document for himself. He pulled out a piece of paper that had been crumpled to the point of being wrinkled, lying around amidst a messy pile of belongings inside the cluttered desk drawer. The class president silently smoothed out the paper and attentively checked the sparse information written on it with a deeply thoughtful expression. The form clearly stated a request not to participate in the program, but at the place reserved for the guardian's signature, it was still completely blank. In response to the question about that omission, Serim just leisurely leaned back in her chair and declared that she herself never kept things like her parents' signatures on her. Replying to that bitterly poignant confession, Seung-woo just looked at her in silence, his eyes suddenly becoming profound as if trying to see through the hidden loneliness of the girl opposite him. Seung-woo turned back to ask to borrow a pen from a classmate, making the guy merely nod blankly in agreement right away. He held the pen and clicked it with a dry, decisive rhythm, preparing to carry out an action beyond everyone's expectation. Right in front of Serim's nonchalant eyes, he decisively placed the pen onto the crumpled form lying around on the wooden desk surface. Each distinct stroke of handwriting gradually appeared under the steady hands of the exemplary class president, in a silence enveloping the two of them. He picked up the newly signed form and asserted that everybody did this, simultaneously announcing he would take it to submit for her. Finishing his words, Seung-woo nonchalantly turned his back and walked away without needing to wait for any further response or objection from the other party. Watching his poised back gradually distancing, Serim couldn't hold back from muttering and scolding him as an incredibly annoying nuisance. Suddenly, Seung-woo paused and turned his head to look back at her with an extremely sharp and cold gaze, as if he had heard that entire complaint just now. While Serim quickly dropped her head down to the desk to evade questioning, he still stood there utterly astonished at her defiant attitude. Seung-woo silently told himself that he always tried to live a tranquil life without causing trouble for anyone, especially while still being in this school. Seung-woo was writing and secretly telling himself that throughout his perfect life, he had never been called an annoying person or done anything so troublesome. The more he thought about it, the more he lost his composure to the point of accidentally pressing hard and breaking the tip of his pen right on the paper, his mind still hovering around the question of whether he was truly that bad. Sitting alone at his desk in a chaotic mood, he felt his pride deeply wounded and wondered if waking up a sleeping friend was such a grave sin. Seung-woo secretly wondered what he had done wrong, while a schoolgirl posted an announcement on the bulletin board and asked everyone in the mentoring program to come and check the list. His best friend excitedly invited him to go see the results, while also expressing curiosity about the identity of the lucky person who would be directly guided by this talented class president. With absolute faith in his friend's abilities, the friend firmly asserted that no matter who the other person was, Seung-woo would excellently fulfill the role of a mentor. Seung-woo quietly approached the bulletin board amidst the whispering of the surrounding crowd of students, his heart still relentlessly wondering about his new partner. But he suddenly froze when he saw the words writing the names Kang Seung-woo and Serim placed next to each other, like a deeply ironic arrangement of fate. Both he and the friend standing next to him were stunned to the point of immobility, their eyes wide open in shock at the harsh reality clearly appearing right before their eyes. Unable to contain his shock, the friend yelled out in astonishment upon realizing that the delinquent girl Serim was the very person Seung-woo would be responsible for guiding from now on. Seung-woo quickly covered his yelling friend's mouth to prevent unwanted attention, simultaneously letting out a soft, exasperated sigh. On the green board, the text signaling the self-study period appeared clearly under the afternoon sunlight, marking the beginning of a highly challenging mission. He told himself that this was just a 50-minute mentoring session, and he could perfectly maintain the demeanor of an exemplary class president. Tightly gripping his school supplies in his hand, he decided to brush off the previous curses to focus on completing the assigned responsibility. The boy approached and asked a schoolgirl sitting next to Serim to temporarily swap seats with him, so he could start the session. The dry sound of a chair being pulled echoed as Seung-woo sat down next to the girl who was nonchalantly resting her head, sleeping soundly. He held his pen and tapped it rhythmically on the wooden desk to wake Serim from her slumber amidst the quiet classroom space. She slightly opened her eyes to look at him with deep annoyance and hostility upon hearing her name called out so decisively. Looking straight into Serim's deep black eyes, he sternly asserted that he was exactly her academic mentor for this semester. Despite the other party's indifference, Seung-woo still calmly requested that both of them put forth their best effort until the final exams ended. A close-up showed Serim's lips slightly smirking as if preparing to utter highly provocative words directed at the other party. Lying with her face pressed against the desk, she looked up at Seung-woo with a mysterious smile that made the surrounding atmosphere extremely stifling. Faced with that defiant attitude, Seung-woo could only widen his eyes in astonishment and pressingly asked why he had to do as she wished. The class president sat thoughtfully at his desk, his eyes pensive as if trying to rearrange the turmoil that had just occurred in his mind. Everything was inherently going very smoothly, with a perfect transcript always topping the grade, a testament to his relentless effort. When a friend stopped by to invite him to the cafeteria, he quickly packed up his books and smiled in agreement to relieve the tension, because he always believed that his life up to now had always proceeded according to an incredibly complete and orderly script. Walking down the corridor with close friends, Seung-woo always exuded the elegance of a true school idol. He proudly affirmed the value of the good friendships he possessed throughout his student life. But that peacefulness seemed about to end when the classroom space suddenly became noisy, with furious shouting. Seung-woo proudly reviewed the brilliant achievements he had strived to attain in countless large and small competitions at school. Even in the warm space of family dinners, he always maintained absolute standard and connection with every member. When presenting his glowing transcript to his father, he modestly said that these exams were somewhat easy compared to his actual capabilities. In response to that effort was the proud gaze of his father as he affirmed that he always trusted him to do everything well on his own. With a radiant smile on his lips, Seung-woo politely obeyed his father and received encouragement that he should just freely do whatever he desired. Then, the spring of his 18th year suddenly arrived, bringing along a promise to try his best until the final exams with his new partner. Finally, while sitting next to this highly troublesome girl, he bitterly realized that his long-standing perfect life had started showing cracks. Seung-woo decisively asserted that mentoring was a school regulation, so Serim's personal opinion was completely invalid. He patiently explained quadratic equations despite the girl nonchalantly declaring she was going to sleep and telling him to just talk to himself. The exemplary class president could only let out a deeply helpless sigh at the other party's extremely uncooperative attitude. Unable to be patient any longer, he unexpectedly reached out and snatched off her earphones to stop the ignorance and force her to return to reality. Seung-woo sternly demanded that she focus her attention on the lesson, creating a highly tense, confrontational atmosphere right at the desk. Faced with the question of why she couldn't coordinate decently, Serim still lazily lay flat on the desk and uttered a definitive rejection. She looked up at him with razor-sharp eyes, then nonchalantly blurted out a declaration that she truly hated him. Leaving the stifling classroom space, Seung-woo's footsteps headed straight towards the deserted restroom area at the end of the corridor. The sound of rushing water echoed in the quiet space as he tried to use the coolness to soothe his hot-headed temper. Looking at his reflection in the mirror with a soaking wet face, the male student seemed to be struggling to maintain his usual calm demeanor. A friend approached and asked out of deep concern, but Seung-woo merely replied softly that he was fine. He used his hand to wipe a drop of sweat on his neck and affirmed it was no big deal, even though inwardly he was silently cursing in utter frustration. At the teacher's office, the teacher held a stack of documents in her hands with a highly skeptical expression when asking whether Serim had completely left the assignment section blank. The silent teacher's office sign seemed to be witnessing a rare failure in the inherently perfect life of the elite class president. Seung-woo stood frozen, then spoke up to apologize for not being able to change the other party, simultaneously asserting that everything would be meaningless if Serim refused to make an effort herself. The teacher hastily waved her hand to reassure him that he had nothing to apologize for, because in reality, Serim was an incredibly difficult case for anyone. She slightly bowed in deep regret as she confided that she herself had placed high expectations on him finding a way to tame that rebellious girl. The teacher's eyes flashed with a hint of disappointment as she judged that perhaps Serim was a challenge beyond his reach, and admitted that she had expected too much from him. While she allowed him to stop without suffering any disadvantages, Seung-woo suddenly glared, asking himself why he had to resignedly listen to words that felt like a denial of his own capabilities. Standing silently in the middle of the room, he felt secretly resentful, wondering whether failing to win over someone like Han Serim was truly such a huge problem that it would make him give up. Serim stood quietly behind the door, observing the conversation between Seung-woo and the teacher in the quiet teacher's office. With a resolute gaze, the class president seemed to be struggling with highly conflicting thoughts within his heart. Han Serim unexpectedly revealed herself right at the entrance, drawing everyone's attention with her incredibly familiar, reckless appearance. Her lips slightly curved into an underlying smile, as if secretly challenging the opposite person's patience. Faced with the fact that the girl was planning to leave school early without permission again, Seung-woo could not hide his annoyance and demanded she stop immediately. The teacher gave a slight nod at his seriousness, then softened her voice to call Seung-woo's name to prepare to make a new proposal. Amidst the office space cluttered with documents, the teacher offered to change the person he was mentoring to ease the pressure. She feared that if he abandoned this responsibility, Serim would truly fall into a situation where absolutely no one would step up to help. But Seung-woo suddenly gave a radiant smile and asserted that he did not want her to suffer disadvantages just because he had not tried his best. His determination to continue being Serim's mentor left the teacher stunned in astonishment at such an altruistic heart. The teacher spared no words of praise for Seung-woo as an excellent student, while demanding Serim quickly step closer to begin the work. In response to the question of whether she intended to study hard or not, Serim merely secretly judged that he was truly an incredibly annoying guy. Seung-woo stood silently with a stern face, his mind beginning to step back into memories of the highly proud times from before. He secretly asserted that throughout his entire life, there had never been a goal he could not achieve if he truly tried his best. The class president stood leaning against the corridor wall in front of the teacher's office, seemingly preparing his mentality for an entirely new plan of conquest. The sound of the two people's footsteps echoed in unison on the wooden floor as they left the office together in an atmosphere full of awkwardness. Seung-woo's gaze slightly glanced at the girlfriend beside him as he silently determined that his biggest goal right now was exactly her. He was determined to excellently complete the mentoring activity and at all costs had to significantly improve Han Serim's inherently terrible transcript. With a smile full of hidden meaning, he told himself that whether he wanted to or not, he had to find a way to approach her more, then asked if she had clearly heard the teacher's recent instructions. The footsteps of the two tapped rhythmically on the floor as Seung-woo encouraged both to try their best together to achieve the best results. Serim coldly turned her head, uttering a brutally blunt dismissal that made the surrounding atmosphere suddenly freeze. In contrast to that coldness, the school cafeteria was still bustling with the noisy chatting and laughter of hundreds of dining students. Seung-woo stood amidst that noisy space, his eyes constantly observing and beginning to form his own judgments about his female classmate. He noticed that Serim was always solitary by the long table, seemingly completely isolated without a single close friend. That girl quietly used her chopsticks to push away the vegetables she hated to a corner of the food tray with a highly picky expression. Yet Seung-woo proactively approached, set his food tray down across from her, and gently wished her a very delicious lunch. Serim gave a slight glance in another direction with an emotionless attitude, as if the presence of the class president only brought her nuisance. Suddenly, she reached out her chopsticks, grabbed all the unsatisfactory pieces of food, and nonchalantly tossed them straight into the food tray of the person who had just greeted her. Seung-woo stood stunned in astonishment, looking down at the pile of leftover vegetables he had just received with a heart full of indescribable shock. Serim lightly rested her chin on her hand and gave a highly sarcastic smile as she replied that he should have his meal too, marking a highly turbulent beginning for this connection. Seung-woo was stunned seeing Serim nonchalantly setting her food tray down opposite him and starting her lunch in a highly defiant manner right before his eyes. He stared at the pile of leftover vegetables she had just picked over to him, secretly judging that this girl truly lacked the most basic rules of etiquette. When the school dismissal bell rang, the schoolyard became bustling with groups of students rushing home under the brilliant golden sunlight of the late afternoon. Spotting the familiar figure ahead, Seung-woo proactively approached and asked Serim whether she was preparing to return home or not. He quickly explained that he was also going the same way and expressed a desire for both to walk together to easily discuss the mentoring work. Serim turned her head back with a highly sarcastic smile. She declared she didn't mind at all if he insisted on tagging along behind like that. Yet she immediately dropped a cold threat about his organs potentially being stolen at any time, leaving the male student frozen in astonishment. Watching Serim's fading back, Seung-woo sighed in exasperation upon realizing that she was continuing to weave such intimidating lies. He silently swore that he had absolutely no intention of stalking her and wondered if there was anyone in this world who would actually believe such far-fetched stories. Behind his back, the classroom space gradually became deserted with the remaining students sinking into a belated sleep amidst the quiet atmosphere. Serim quietly sat at her desk, her ears tightly plugged with a music-listening device as a way for her to isolate herself from the noisy surrounding world. Without a bit of hesitation, Seung-woo approached and decisively pulled up a chair to sit opposite her, causing her private space to be shattered. He unexpectedly reached out and snatched off Serim's earphones, forcing her to return to reality and directly face his perseverance. The class president slightly frowned, then dropped a remark that her music taste was truly very bizarre compared to that cold exterior. Faced with his highly curious question about her personal hobbies, Serim still maintained an emotionless face with deep, mysterious eyes. But she abruptly pushed the button to turn the volume up to maximum, an action of fierce resistance aimed straight at the classmate opposite her. Seung-woo flinched back, his hands tightly gripping his aching ears while the girl with pitch-black hair still quietly observed his confusion. Serim slightly smirked with a hidden meaning and unexpectedly pressed him, asking whether he was giving her some kind of special attention. He immediately dismissed that with a deeply exhausted expression, asserting that he himself absolutely had not the slightest bit of personal feelings for her. Ultimately, amidst the sunlit classroom, Seung-woo still firmly expressed that no matter what, he would strive to find a way to become closer to her. Serim looked at Seung-woo with deeply challenging eyes, her arrogant sitting posture showing unconcealed rebellion. Suddenly, a loud crashing sound shook the entire classroom, signaling an angry storm about to erupt from the rebellious girl. A brutally intimidating action was carried out by Serim by forcefully stomping her foot onto the other party's chair to suppress his perseverance. She glared threateningly at Seung-woo, demanding he immediately stop his annoying actions if he didn't want his life to end right here, then coldly ordered him to get lost at once if he understood the severity of what she had just warned about. However, contrary to her harsh exterior, deep inside, Serim secretly harbored the intention to prolong this highly dramatic conversation even further. Faced with that aggression, Seung-woo still calmly rested his chin on his hand, challenging whether he truly had to die if he kept holding his ground. Serim grew even more frustrated and repeated her brutally blunt dismissal, demanding he never appear in front of her ever again. But then her eyes suddenly wavered a bit as she secretly admitted that she herself truly wanted him to continue guiding her like right now. Finally, Seung-woo smirked smugly and pressingly asked why a good thing like making an effort to study could make her want to murder him. Seung-woo looked straight into the other's sharp eyes and asserted that he knew she was trying to intimidate him, but he did not believe any of the rumors about her. Unexpectedly, Serim reached out and grabbed Seung-woo's chin tightly, leaving him stunned. She growled, declaring that she herself did not know what fear was either. She leaned her face in close and coldly ordered him to stop playing the good guy right away because it only made her feel extremely annoyed. Seung-woo froze at that bold action. He only managed to utter Han Serim's name as she abruptly let go and turned her back to leave. Right at that moment, a stern-looking man appeared at the classroom door, breaking the tense atmosphere that had just built up between the two of them. Ignoring the probing gazes of the surrounding classmates, Serim quietly walked out of the classroom with her usual reckless demeanor. Seung-woo thoughtfully watched his female friend's back, an indescribable doubt rising in his heart about the mystery enveloping this person. Curiosity reached its peak when the students in the class rushed to the window, constantly whispering and gossiping about a strange sight below. Right in the schoolyard, a luxurious black car was already waiting, along with a man in a black suit respectfully opening the door to welcome Serim. Standing from above, observing the entire incident, Seung-woo's eyes became extremely sharp and cold as he realized this girl's background was not simple at all. Seung-woo and his classmates crowded around the window, endlessly murmuring and pressing each other about whether what they had just witnessed was the truth or not. The school scene appeared peaceful under the cherry blossom canopy, accompanied by a belated monologue that he would only truly realize everything later on. That he himself was the only person who dared to stand up and challenge Han Serim's ironclad and mysterious rules. Under the brilliant golden sunlight, the school building still carried its usual majestic appearance, but inside, unpredictable turmoils were smoldering. Streams of students hurriedly strode through the school gates, completely unaware of a fateful confrontation about to take place right here. A close-up showed the pure white earphones emitting sounds that completely isolated the black-haired girl from the hustle and bustle of the world. Serim quietly walked down the empty street, her distant eyes and the phone in her hand acting like a fortress protecting her own solitude. Suddenly, a pair of shoes decisively stepped forward and blocked her path, creating a highly dramatic intersection between two entirely opposite extremes. She gave a slight glance over with a cold, highly skeptical face upon recognizing the annoyingly persistent nature of the person blocking her way. Standing under a beautiful rain of cherry blossoms, Seung-woo lightly raised his hand to his ear, gesturing a request for her to remove the barrier to listen to the words he was about to say. Serim slightly took off her earphones to listen, while Seung-woo began sharing that he had thought a lot about the recent events after returning home. Standing in the middle of the cherry blossom-shaded street, he slightly bowed his head to offer a sincere apology if he had accidentally done anything to bother her. With apologetic eyes, he admitted that his lack of thought had perhaps unintentionally caused unwarranted pain to the other party. Seung-woo stood with his back turned and boldly declared that he wanted to clear up all misunderstandings right at this moment. He looked straight into Serim's eyes with an extremely serious expression as he affirmed that he truly wanted to become even closer to her. The class president explained that it was the only way to help him excellently complete the academic mentoring program he was in charge of. Serim paused, then coldly pressed him, asking whether all his persistent efforts to approach her up until now were simply for the sake of work. She looked deeply into his mind with razor-sharp eyes, accompanied by a mysterious warning that nothing good would come to anyone who dared to get involved with her. Even as Seung-woo still tried to reiterate his responsibilities as a mentor, Serim abruptly cut him off with a highly dramatic hypothesis about the malicious rumors being true. She leaned her face in defiantly and asked whether he would still have enough courage to want to become friends if she was truly a delinquent belonging to the underworld. Seung-woo scratched his head in confusion, asserting that he knew she was not a bad person, but even so, he still yearned to understand her more. While Serim still maintained soulless eyes, he secretly listed 3 strange things that he had just discovered about this highly mysterious partner. All of a sudden, Serim reached out and grabbed Seung-woo's tie tightly, throwing him completely into a passive position. He was stunned upon being pulled forcefully forward, and bitterly realized the first thing was the fact that she truly did not have a single friend. The second thing was even more shocking, as she seemed to possess absolutely no common sense or basic rules of etiquette at all. The surrounding crowd of students all had to widen their eyes in astonishment at an impulsive action about to take place right in the middle of the schoolyard. Without a word of warning, Serim pulled Seung-woo closer and gave him a passionate kiss right in front of everyone's witnessing eyes. Amidst the vibrant spring space, that girl performed that bold act as if she were living without needing to worry about tomorrow. An ear-piercing sound rang out, as if marking the collapse of a standardized life that Seung-woo had painstakingly built for so long. He panicked, wiping his lips, then furiously shouted, asking what the hell she was doing, while the other party still maintained a strangely calm expression. Serim slightly smirked in triumph and declared that from this moment on, the two of them had officially become closer. She nonchalantly turned her back and walked away, leaving Seung-woo standing rooted in the middle of the schoolyard with countless chaotic thoughts. The class president's face flushed bright red with embarrassment. He let out a frustrated growl at the rebellious girl's sudden action. While Serim's figure gradually faded into the distance, the people around had not yet recovered from their shock upon witnessing an unimaginable scene right in the middle of the schoolyard. Two schoolgirls constantly gossiped and blushed when recalling the shocking moment that had just occurred early this morning. Another male student also showed astonishment when mentioning how the two of them had run into each other in a highly ambiguous way right on the way to school. The best friend suddenly slammed his hand hard on the desk and yelled loudly, demanding to clarify the truth of the shocking story related to Han Serim. Faced with the entire class's fierce questioning about that unexpected kiss, Seung-woo still tried to maintain a cold expression to hide his confusion. He decisively put his phone down on the desk and spoke up to correct that it was not a kiss at all, but merely an accidental collision between their lips. With sharp eyes, he affirmed that he was not the one taking the initiative, but rather he was the one who had to endure that forced action from the other party. Seung-woo stood surrounded by curious gazes and pressed to ask if anyone knew where Han Serim was currently. The sound of whispering and gossiping echoed throughout the class as they asserted that him going to look for her was the exact proof for the recent rumors. Looking down at the document folder on the desk, he secretly judged that Han Serim was actually much smarter than he had ever imagined. By turning him into the center of false rumors, she had cleverly created a barrier, making it so he could not easily approach her. Seung-woo's face hardened in deep thought upon realizing he had accidentally fallen into a highly sophisticatedly arranged psychological game of chess. Meanwhile, the true culprit had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a solitary backpack hanging next to an empty chair under the afternoon sunlight. Suddenly, the teacher walked into the class with a radiant smile and called out Seung-woo's name as if to start a highly suggestive conversation. The teacher approached and excitedly said that he had caught wind of the shocking feat he had just accomplished earlier this morning. Faced with the teasing that quiet ones usually do big things, Seung-woo could only give a forced smile while his mind was secretly cursing in utter helplessness. Witnessing the sheer exhaustion evident on his face, a friend kindly offered him medicine and worriedly asked if his head was aching too much. The school nurse kindly handed him medicine and instructed Seung-woo to quickly lie down and rest on the empty bed behind the partition curtain. He quietly strode through the tranquil space of the infirmary, trying to use the silence to soothe his aching head. However, right as he pulled the curtain open, the class president was suddenly stunned to discover that Serim had been sound asleep there since who knows when. That girl let out a soft, tired groan, then continued to sink deeply into her slumber, revealing a delicate face entirely devoid of defenses. Not wanting to break this peacefulness, Seung-woo gently sat down on the adjacent bed and told himself that both of them should just stay silent to rest. The two beds lay parallel to each other under the faded afternoon sunlight, creating a strange intersection between two souls that were inherently always at odds. Lying on the white mattress, Seung-woo looked up at the ceiling pensively with so many concerns about the arduous mentoring plan ahead. On the other side of the thin curtain, Serim was still sleeping very deeply, completely isolated from the drama and malicious rumors surrounding her. He silently judged that if this beauty were attached to the rumor of an idol trainee, it would probably be much more convincing than the image of a delinquent. Suddenly, Serim woke up and looked at him with a highly mysterious smile, then pressed him, asking if he was gradually developing feelings for her. Seung-woo slightly lay down and calmly responded that he could understand the reason why Serim would develop such suspicions. Yet his mind abruptly halted when he suddenly saw a long scar etched on her neck like a testament to a highly turbulent past. Serim's face suddenly became strangely tranquil. It seemed her usual edginess had temporarily disappeared under the afternoon sunlight. The class president could only look at her in silence, while inside his heart rose chaotic emotions never before seen in his perfect life. The two lay parallel in the quiet infirmary, separated only by a thin curtain, yet seemingly in two completely different worlds. Serim abruptly rolled over, then uttered a highly provocative tease as she asked whether he was a pervert stalking her. Seung-woo could only close his eyes in resignation upon being accused by Serim as a persistent stalker, making the atmosphere between them incredibly awkward. He decisively denied it and asserted that he only came in here to rest because of the headache caused by her, but Serim merely responded with a highly skeptical attitude. Serim lay on her side, teasing that Seung-woo's longing gaze showed he wanted to go further, but the class president hastily spoke up to deny it. Seung-woo's eyes narrowed slightly in a probing manner as he tried to search for an answer to the mysteries enveloping his female friend. Unable to hold back any longer, he directly pressed her, asking about the true cause that led to the long scar deeply etched on Serim's neck. Responding to that curiosity, Serim vaguely asked if he had enough courage to hear the truth, and received a decisive affirmation from him. Seung-woo hypothesized whether she had once been assaulted by a gang of thugs, but Serim only closed her eyes with a highly mysterious attitude, only for her to nonchalantly drop a shocking remark that the scar was due to her playing around with the man she had just kissed, leaving him absolutely speechless. She stood up to adjust her clothes and brutally affirmed that the feeling of being next to him was truly awful, ignoring the sarcastic remark about her unpleasant way of speaking. Standing by the sunlit window, Serim lightly placed a finger on her lips and made a highly provocative remark that his kiss earlier was actually very rough. The black-haired girl quietly walked away, leaving Seung-woo still sitting stunned on the infirmary bed with so many messy thoughts. Serim stopped at the door to button the final buttons of her shirt and gave a slight glance back, as if intending to reveal one final secret. Seung-woo's face flushed red with confusion as he inwardly denied all of Serim's highly teasing assumptions just now. His hands gently took the cap off his lip balm, as if to seek some composure amidst the chaotic streams of thoughts surrounding him. Sitting quietly at his desk, he applied his lip balm while bitterly realizing that having a normal conversation with that girl seemed to be impossible. The image of the long scar on Serim's neck kept haunting his mind along with the firm conviction that she had definitely lied about its true origin. The class president sat thoughtfully, wondering if it was a deep cut or not, while the friend next to him was secretly moving closer to reveal earth-shattering information. The friend whispered softly into his ear and asserted 100% that the terrifying mark was exactly a wound left by a knife. Seung-woo's eyes became exceedingly serious upon hearing the suggestion to listen very carefully to the terrifying secrets regarding his female friend's background. A traumatic past gradually emerged with the image of a small, heavily bruised little Serim being adopted by a gang boss whom she called father. Amidst that cruel world, Serim had once found warmth and protection in the arms of someone incredibly precious to her life. Yet that fleeting peace was soon choked away when a cold, sharp blade unexpectedly swung up right in front of the young girl on a fateful evening. Serim screamed out to her father and risked her life to rush out and shield him as the cruel blade was about to strike down on a fateful night. She collapsed on the floor after taking a deep slash to her shoulder to protect the life of a mysterious person from the rage. Without shedding a single tear, Serim silently sharpened her will for revenge right in the midst of extreme physical pain. Accepting the binding ties beside her powerful adoptive father, she considered it the price to pay for letting the other person live. Ever since that bloody incident, Serim chose to isolate herself on high and never allowed anyone to step into her heart, because she always believed that anyone who tried to approach her would have to suffer unwarranted, painful endings. Suddenly, his best friend solemnly declared that the entire tragic story just now was actually just the script for his new work. Seung-woo slightly curled his lips sarcastically upon realizing he had correctly guessed that his friend was merely fabricating wild things. In the middle of the empty room, he secretly blamed himself for wasting time listening while the friend still wondered why he cared so much about Serim. The friend was suddenly stunned as if struck by lightning when pressingly asking whether the elite class president had truly developed feelings for that delinquent girl. Seung-woo sat with his chin resting on his hand in deep thought before the barrage of questions about whether he truly harbored feelings for Serim. Childhood memories returned with the image of a small Seung-woo practicing the flute with all his might to strive for a perfect life. The boy back then flushed red, striving to blow every rhythm of the flute with eyes full of stubbornness and defiance. When lying exhausted on the floor to calm down, he caught the stern gaze of his father standing at the room door. The father picked up the flute and reminded him that while everyone else had succeeded, he was the only one still stuck in place and being troublesome. He looked down at his son lying motionless and pressingly asked whether he truly wanted to end everything by giving up. The assertion that surrendering is failure became the guiding light, helping him engrave perseverance deep into his heart. Returning to the present, Seung-woo tightly gripped his pen with a razor-sharp gaze like a proudly defiant declaration of war regarding who would be the ultimate winner. He decisively reached out his hand to block Serim's path right at the classroom door, forcing the rebellious girl to stop and face him directly. Despite the curious glances around, the class president boldly suggested that both of them walk together on the way home this afternoon. Serim narrowed her eyes at Seung-woo with a highly indifferent look upon hearing the proposal to walk home together after school. He hastily conceded and affirmed that if she found it annoying, just letting him walk with her halfway was enough. The crowd of students started whispering and gossiping about the two actually dating, even fabricating that the class president himself was the one who initiated the kiss. Serim quietly lowered her head and walked past the probing gazes, leaving behind countless words of doubt about an unimaginable relationship. The rebellious girl decisively swung her arm to push Seung-woo aside and coldly demanded that he get out of the way immediately. Ignoring that brutally blunt dismissal, he still radiantly waved goodbye and did not forget to say "see you again tomorrow." In a corner of the class, malicious rumors sparked again when someone asserted that Serim had threatened to murder him if he refused to agree to be her boyfriend. Two schoolgirls standing in the corridor could not help but be shocked at the fabricated information that Seung-woo was carrying a debt from his female classmate. Even on the stadium, the boys endlessly mocked him as merely a lustful guy who blindly dove into this dangerous challenge. Sitting quietly at his desk with a highly fatigued and exhausted face, Seung-woo seemed to be worn out facing the mess that he had bravely thrown himself into. Seung-woo sat blankly at his desk with a fatigued face when he suddenly heard his name called from behind. A group of students immediately surrounded him and curiously pressed him, asking whether he was truly dating the delinquent girl Han Serim or not. In response to the crowd's curiosity, he looked up with a calm face and uttered a definitive denial. But new rumors started spreading all over the corridor when someone asserted that Seung-woo himself was the one who had just been dumped. Amidst the space of the cherry blossom-shaded school, the hypothesis about the two merely pretending to break up continued to be colorfully fabricated. Night fell, enveloping the quiet high-rise apartment buildings, but the light from the class president's room had not yet gone out. His mother gently opened the room door and worriedly asked why he hadn't gone to sleep yet, receiving a promise that he would rest right after finishing his work. Seung-woo meticulously took notes on the paper and explained that he himself was trying to select the most suitable exercises to give to a friend. Even as his mother worried about the other party refusing to cooperate in the mentoring program, he still softened his voice to affirm that he was fine. Only to, with a smile full of confidence, boldly declare that at all costs he would force that rebellious girl to seriously carry out her studies. The morning schoolyard scene was still as bustling as usual, but hidden behind it was the silent perseverance of a new plan of conquest. Seung-woo unexpectedly approached and decisively leaned his hands on Serim's desk, drawing the attention of the girl, who was immersed in her own world. With a gentle smile, He slightly leaned down to ask whether she had returned home safely yesterday or not. He presented a carefully prepared document folder and explained that since the lessons in class were too difficult, he had personally selected easier types of problems from the workbook. The class president pointed out important formulas meticulously noted in the margins to her, hoping she could apply them to start over from the most basic steps. Despite his friends sitting behind endlessly teasing about him caring way too much about his girlfriend, Seung-woo still sternly reminded her to remember to solve that entire pile of homework. Serim sat quietly staring at the set of problems on the desk, her gaze slightly wavering at the other party's bizarre degree of enthusiasm. Cleaning duty time arrived. While other students were busy wiping windows, Seung-woo still quietly held a broom to sweep the corridor as a way to practice patience. In a corner of the class, a crowd of classmates was gathering to chat and suddenly blurted out a highly astonished question upon witnessing the class president's unbelievable degree of perseverance. While carrying the trash can to empty it, Seung-woo listened to his friend's praise about his rare dedication, simultaneously secretly affirming that he would never give up halfway. The friend walking beside him burst out laughing and said that he had almost forgotten Seung-woo was exactly the type of person who must win at all costs. Meanwhile, Serim was engrossed in running around and happily urging her friend to quickly chase after her in the sunlit schoolyard. Suddenly, a heavy collision occurred, causing the trash can in Seung-woo's hand to overturn right as the young girl brushed past. Serim stood stunned, collapsing onto the floor amidst the messy pile of garbage, while Seung-woo only managed to utter a highly embarrassed apology. He quickly knelt down to ask if she was hurt and intended to help her pick up the items scattered all over the place. Seung-woo frowned and pressingly asked why she was running so fast, only to receive a harsh retaliation that he himself was the one who started running first. Lying completely isolated amidst the filthy trash, the math worksheet that he had painstakingly prepared for her was now nothing but ruined fragments of shredded paper. The school building still stood majestic under the afternoon sky, as if witnessing a quiet low point in the class president's mentoring efforts. Serim let out a soft, exasperated sigh, her face clearly showing a weary look at the consecutive troubles occurring. She stood blocking Seung-woo's desk and coldly asked whether he intended to get lost to stop bothering her life. Serim decisively slammed her hand down on the desk, creating a piercing noise as if to assert her highly overwhelming presence. She stared intensely at the torn, taped-up worksheet, then coldly sneered that he still hadn't been able to solve anything. Seung-woo still maintained a calm face with a radiant smile on his lips as he softened his voice to ask whether she needed some help. Serim's eyes suddenly flashed with a proudly defiant gaze as she felt the competitive spirit gradually exploding behind her back. The sound of a hand slamming on the desk echoed once more like a fierce declaration of war against anyone who dared to block her footsteps. Looking from above, the black-haired girl's figure swept through the room like a storm carrying uncontrollable chaos. The surrounding crowd of students could only widen their eyes in horror and sweat bullets upon witnessing the fiery clash of two opposite extremes. Seung-woo let out a long sigh at his desk, secretly admitting that conquering Serim's psychology was truly not easy at all. He returned home in an exhausted mood, letting himself lie stretched out on the sofa and staring blankly at the ceiling to search for a way out of the deadlock. His father walked into the living room with a gentle smile. He remarked that it had been a very long time since he last saw his son reveal such a pensive face. Seung-woo softly called out to his father, then anxiously asked about the secret to winning over the heart of a person who inherently always showed him hatred. His father sat down beside him and expressed surprise because this was the first time someone had actually developed hatred for a perfect guy like his son. Faced with the speculation that perhaps he himself had been too annoying, Seung-woo startled, sitting bolt upright and asking in astonishment why his father could perceive everything so perfectly. The father began to slowly recount his passionate youth, when he too was at his age and faced similar troubles. Memories returned with the image of a teacher who once groundlessly hated and shouted at him right in the middle of the office, because she thought he always maintained an attitude of looking down on her. Even without understanding the reason why he was hated, the father back then only knew to bow his head resignedly, then unexpectedly made a highly bold decision. He calmly revealed that he himself had chosen to unrequitedly love that very teacher, leaving Seung-woo completely frozen in astonishment at the unpredictable move. The father recounted that in the past, he always proactively ran up and bowed whenever he met that teacher with the brightest smile possible. He made an effort to focus on listening to the lectures, enthusiastically spoke up, and even wrote a thank you letter just to see who would be the ultimate winner between the two of them. In the father's palm at that time was a small candy, a simple gift containing a highly delicate plan of conquest. He shyly offered the candy for the teacher to try, while she was still working diligently at her high-pressure desk. Listening to his father's assertion that it was the exact way to fully win someone's heart, Seung-woo could only silently ponder with a highly skeptical expression. The image of a lone ball rolling on the field was attached to his monologue that he himself had never known what the feeling of unrequited love was. Sitting quietly on the bleachers, Seung-woo looked far away and posed a hypothesis to himself about what if he actually developed feelings for Serim. He gently reached out to catch a falling cherry blossom petal and secretly determined that the first thing he needed to do when liking someone was collecting as much information about the other person as possible to grasp all the secrets hidden behind that reckless and prickly exterior. Standing observing in the gymnasium, Seung-woo judged that the most terrifying thing about Serim was not her fighting ability, but the mysterious power backing her up. Seung-woo held his pen to take notes, while listening to the rumors that Serim was actually the illegitimate child of an incredibly wealthy family. Another schoolgirl firmly asserted that her having extorted tattooed thugs in the past was merely a fabricated story. The friend sitting on the floor suggested he should go meet someone in the next class who was Serim's middle school classmate to find out the truth. The class 2 to 5 sign appeared silently under the sunlight, as if inviting him to step into a journey of discovering hidden secrets. The class 2 to 5 schoolgirl sighed softly as she affirmed with a weary face that, even from before, Serim was already an incredibly famous figure. She revealed that the guys who once intended to approach Serim for her beauty all suddenly disappeared, or were forced to transfer schools in a highly shady manner. Seung-woo attentively took notes on the information that for a long time, highly aggressive-looking men frequently came to pick Serim up after school. He frowned slightly upon realizing that was the exact basis causing the rumors about her underworld background to start spreading strongly. The image of Serim standing silently by the luxurious black car appeared like a missing puzzle piece in the picture of her highly mysterious life. He tightly gripped his pen, recording his final judgment that Serim definitely had incredibly dangerous connections. Seung-woo sat thoughtfully at his desk, his hand lightly touching his chin while skimming through the written notes about the hypothesis of whether Serim was an accomplice or just a victim harassed by the underworld. He entered the school cafeteria amidst the bustling atmosphere to continue his second important mission, which was to thoroughly understand everything about that girl. Seung-woo's gaze was glued to every minor gesture, from her habit of holding chopsticks to the way Serim quietly observed her food tray to decode the rules in her own world. Sitting opposite her amidst hundreds of students, he smiled and asked what she was planning to do upon seeing her still maintaining her distant and highly defensive attitude as usual. The class president gently reassured her not to mind too much, but to just focus on her meal, while secretly judging that actually, sometimes Serim still showed rare smiles. Yet he sighed softly upon realizing that if observed closely enough, every smirk of hers carried incredibly distinct hidden emotional nuances. Serim's eyes suddenly hardened with hostility, a testament to the extreme annoyance she was enduring faced with the bizarrely persistent nature of her classmate. Suddenly, the classroom space was shaken by the teacher's highly shocked shouting upon witnessing an out-of-control incident that had just occurred. She unleashed her fury on Seung-woo and continuously questioned where his college future and his life would head if he kept getting involved in these troubles. Amidst the storm of rage, Serim merely tilted her head slightly and gave a highly arrogant half-smile as if secretly triumphing over the turmoil she had just created. The PE teacher boldly requested the whole class to pair up based on their roll numbers, opening up a highly ironic arrangement right in the middle of the schoolyard. A poor schoolgirl froze in terror upon realizing her partner was exactly Serim, the girl radiating a massive invisible pressure. The girl trembled to the point of tears while Seung-woo quietly walked past. It seemed he was secretly recording every reaction of the people around him. In response to that fear was Serim's highly dissatisfied smirk, an expression showing she was not keen on having to cooperate with others either. Right after the practice session, that schoolgirl burst into sobbing tears and complained about her bad luck constantly having to be near someone she absolutely did not want to. While her friends surrounded her to check on her and felt sorry for her recent terrifying experience, Serim still nonchalantly ignored everything with a soulless face. However, from Seung-woo's perspective, he secretly judged that occasionally she still revealed a truly genuine smile hidden behind her cold exterior. He had dedicated a lot of effort to decoding Serim's system of expressions, from annoyance and anger to subtle nuances that were hard to name. Apart from those rare moments, Serim usually sat motionless on the stone bench with an emotionless face, making no one able to guess her thoughts. She always chose to block out all communication using her pure white earphones, an action aimed at protecting her absolute private world. Seung-woo noticed Serim's bizarre habit of remaining loyal to wired earphones even though she owned the newest model's smartphone. He silently observed her from afar right at the school gate, trying to capture every rhythm in his female friend's inherently very closed-off life. The rhythm of the two people's footsteps echoed in the schoolyard like a silent pursuit that Seung-woo was painstakingly carrying out. He noticed that entirely unlike her harsh attitude when never confronting him, the everyday Serim always presented herself with a sluggish and lifeless look. Her lonely back striding under the brilliant cherry blossom canopy made him feel as though she were completely drained of energy for the surrounding world. Even during class time, Serim only rested her chin on her hand, looking far away, leaving the class president wondering whether she was truly bored or sinking into her own thoughts. He also discovered her terrifying silence, a person who could go without uttering a single word the entire day if not bothered by someone. In the cafeteria, that girl meticulously used her chopsticks to push away every single piece of carrot from her food tray, revealing her picky habit and special hatred for vegetables. Seeing her sipping on a sweet carton of orange juice, Seung-woo was suddenly glared at and mockingly told by Serim that he was truly an incredibly terrifying stalker. Sitting quietly next to each other on the windy steps, Serim softly asked whether it was true that throughout his perfect life, he had never known what the word give up meant. Seung-woo shook his head slightly and admitted that throughout his entire life, he had truly never tasted the feeling of giving up on anything. Serim sipped her carton of orange juice while asking back whether he himself had ever truly let go of any goal in his life. Her eyes suddenly became empty as she uttered a single word carrying the weight of her having given up on absolutely everything. Amidst the cherry blossom-shaded space, Serim quietly affirmed that she was no longer attached to or retaining any hope whatsoever for the future. The young girl gave a slight glance, then asked if that confession was enough for him to stop bothering her and disappear from her life, making Seung-woo secretly realize she would never answer seriously. The class president remained unflinching, pressing her to see whether becoming her mentor was truly the thing he desired the most right now. Serim continued to sip her juice box. She showed skepticism when asking whether all these annoying efforts were merely for the purpose of completing the mentoring task. She tilted her head to look at him with deeply challenging eyes as she asked whether he was truly harboring some kind of special feeling for her. Seung-woo calmly leaned back and affirmed that her guess was only half right, simultaneously revealing his father's advice about treating her like someone experiencing unrequited love. He looked deep into Serim's eyes and explained that it was the exact secret helping him easily close the distance and understand her in the most genuine way. Serim suddenly burst out laughing, leaving Seung-woo stunned. It seemed this was the first time he saw her truly shed her icy exterior. Serim sipped her orange juice box while commenting that Seung-woo looked exactly like his father, making him quietly wonder if that was an indirect way of calling his dad a terrible person. Amidst the falling cherry blossom petals, he slightly tilted his head to ask and confirm if she would only agree to cooperate during the Wednesday afternoon self-study period. Serim coldly laid out the condition that he had to leave her alone for the rest of the time and absolutely must not look her way or bother her for another second. Facing that ruthless declaration, Seung-woo just quietly lowered his eyes with a thoughtful expression, as if secretly weighing the untamable stubbornness of the girl opposite him. Finally, he decisively agreed and suddenly reached out his hand to make an official pact between the two of them. Flashing a friendly yet confident smile, the class president expressed his desire for both of them to truly work hard together to turn this academic goal into reality. Standing before the hand held out in good faith, Serim just quietly looked down with her beautiful but cold face, having no intention of returning the other's enthusiasm. Ignoring Seung-woo, who was still standing in a daze with his hand hovering in midair, the black-haired girl dismissed everything and decisively turned her back to walk away in silence. Watching the retreating back of the difficult girl, Seung-woo sighed in frustration that she really didn't make things easy at all. The self-study period enveloped the quiet classroom space, where Serim continued to escape reality by burying her head in a deep sleep under her uniform jacket. Serim actually started putting her pen to paper to write the first lines, kicking off the hopeful one-on-one tutoring session with the class president. Seung-woo held the worksheet in his hand with an undeniably astonished expression as he exclaimed that she had actually gotten the right answer. The Wednesday afternoon tutoring session began in the quiet classroom atmosphere, where both focused on numbers and formulas. True to her word, Serim appeared extremely obedient and cooperative, making Seung-woo secretly feel that his perseverance had finally paid off. The class president rested his chin on his hand, intently watching every movement of the girl beside him, seemingly trying to see through the thoughts hidden behind that cold exterior. Seung-woo unconsciously reached out to guide her, suggesting that holding the pen this way would make her feel easier and more comfortable when doing calculations. Receiving a death glare in return, he hurriedly apologized and admitted that he should have left her alone just as initially agreed. He could only justify that it was a hard habit of his to break, while Sarah maintained her indifferent attitude as if the whole thing had nothing to do with her. Seung-woo secretly resolved that if they kept maintaining this mentoring relationship, he would soon find a reason to no longer feel a flutter in his heart for her. Under the bright schoolyard sunlight, Serim sat quietly by herself in her PE uniform with a distant look in her eyes, softly confirming that things were indeed like that. Seung-woo stood in the middle of the sunny schoolyard, lightly tugging at his white t-shirt collar as if trying to chase away the heat and the suffocation smoldering in his heart. His face flashed a look of confusion as thoughts about Serim kept lingering without leaving, even though he constantly reminded himself to keep his distance. Looking down at his hands, he secretly made up his mind that from now on, he wouldn't need to bother or keep an eye on that troublesome girl for another second. The calls from his friends on the soccer field suddenly pulled him back to reality, making him hurriedly apologize. But deep down, he bitterly realized that the habit of caring for someone couldn't be changed overnight. Leaving the practice field, the class president strode along the quiet corridor in his comfortable PE clothes, trying to regain the inherent tranquility of a school idol. Suddenly from behind, a male student approached to block his path and asked him to stop for a moment to answer some questions that were buzzing around the school. With a meaningful smile, he directly put him on the spot by asking if Kang Seung-woo was actually dating in secret just like the recent rumors. Not stopping there, the stranger also made a sarcastic remark, wondering if being engrossed in romance would cost an elite student like him precious time for studying. In the face of backhanded compliments about his taste in girls, Seung-woo kept a calm smile on his lips and gently asked back what Jo Seung-gyu was actually trying to imply. He casually replied that he didn't mean anything by it, just wanted to advise the class president to know how to choose someone on his level to protect his own reputation. Seung-gyu relentlessly spewed insults, assuming that the rumors about Serim being a delinquent definitely had to have some basis in reality. He even deliberately dug deep into the male lead's perfection by sarcastically asking if his mother knew her son was getting involved with a low-class person like her. In the midst of the tense atmosphere, Serim suddenly stepped out from the girls' locker room, making the cowardly Seung-gyu instantly freeze in terror. With a cold demeanor, the black-haired girl nonchalantly brushed past the guy who had just humiliated her without bothering to leave a single word of retort. Seung-woo let out a weary sigh while watching her back, whereas the other male student was still in shock, fearing that she had heard everything. Suddenly, Seung-woo turned around and loudly called Seung-gyu's name to initiate a very serious conversation. The class president decisively clarified that Serim was neither a delinquent nor a low-class person, while also admitting that his mother genuinely didn't know about this yet. Without giving the other guy a chance to react, Seung-woo coldly demanded that he better just focus on studying properly. Seung-gyu stood frozen with his face drained of blood, making the friend accompanying him panic and ask if the two of them had just gotten into a fight. He could only angrily watch the class presidents retreating back and softly mutter with bitterness about the mystery of the guy who had just warned him. Seung-gyu hid in a dark corner with a twisted smile, his heart seething with the intention of seeing Seung-woo completely ruined after what had happened. Amidst the quiet atmosphere of the hallway, the trickling sound of water echoed as a hand silently filled a cup with water, as if to soothe a smoldering anger. Serim stood silently by the water dispenser with her delicate yet sad face, seemingly trying to digest the harsh insults from earlier. The moment she saw Seung-woo's figure approaching, she coldly spoke up to remind him that she had asked him that it's best not to approach her anymore. Ignoring her dismissal, the class president stepped closer to reassure her that Seung-woo definitely wouldn't dare to show up or bother her ever again. In response to his concern was a ruthlessly indifferent attitude as Serim affirmed she didn't care at all because what that guy said was actually not wrong. Seung-woo's eyes flashed a hint of pity as he offered a sincere apology. He understood that Serim was humiliated only because that guy was taking his anger out on his own perfection. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy when Serim unexpectedly turned to question the reason why the male lead had to choose such a forced and exhausting way of living. She saw right through his soul, mocking that it seemed Seung-woo was overly obsessed with always having to appear as a good person in the eyes of the world. Facing the naked truth that had just been exposed, Seung-woo could only look out the window in silence with a secret affirmation that he truly wanted to become a perfectly good person. Serim looked straight into Seung-woo's eyes and asserted that always desiring to become a perfectly good person was actually not a bad thing at all. Her eyes suddenly became unusually gentle, completely shedding her usual prickly demeanor to reveal a delicate elegance under the pale sunlight. Faced with that unexpected understanding, Seung-woo fell slightly silent and wondered if he would ever be brave enough to live true to himself like she did. Serim subtly curled her lips in a meaningful smirk, dropping a challenge that perhaps someone like him would never be able to do that. The male lead immediately bowed his head to look deep into her mystical black eyes and pressed for the reason why she was so sure he had no ability to change. The black-haired girl was momentarily taken aback by his determination. The atmosphere between the two suddenly became suffocatingly silent. Unexpectedly, Serim reached her slender hands forward, taking the initiative to break the barrier of distance that had existed for so long. She gently touched her hand on Seung-woo's firm arm as an unspoken confirmation of the harmony that had just begun to bloom between their two souls. Without leaving another word, Serim decisively turned and walked away, leaving rhythmic footsteps echoing throughout the empty hallway. Watching the fading back of the troublesome girl, Seung-woo offered a soft, contented smile with a fierce belief that the distance between them was truly narrowing. Seung-woo waved goodbye to Serim's back as it gradually disappeared behind the stairs, not forgetting to remind her about tomorrow's self-study session. With a fierce belief that effort could conquer anything, he secretly thought that opening his friend's heart was the inevitable next step. Sitting quietly in the classroom, the class president's face showed a pensive look as he was absorbed in sketching out a plan to approach her. But reality suddenly slapped the male lead right in the face when he was shocked to hear the news that Serim had already quietly ditched school earlier. Seung-woo could only offer a bitterly helpless smile as he realized all his perseverance had once again been ignored by her. Night fell and enveloped the cram school building, where the lights still shone diligently as proof of the heavy academic pressure. Wearing a simple black hoodie, Seung-woo buried his head in a pile of books at the academy with an extremely serious attitude. He lightly touched his lips with melancholy eyes and secretly blamed himself for being too hasty in assessing this relationship. Sitting quietly in the middle of the large classroom, Seung-woo bitterly admitted that the thought of them having grown closer was actually just an illusion. He exhaustedly exclaimed that this was really hard, making the classmate next to him ask out of concern, while he sorrowfully realized in his heart that Serim would never willingly cooperate. Seung-woo diligently solved exercise number 16 at the academy late at night. Even though every calculation step was perfect, the final answer still refused to appear. He bitterly realized that although he thought he had taken one step closer to Serim, he was actually still stuck at the hopelessly stagnant starting point. Dawn broke again over the high-rise building of the high school, beginning a new day with ominous premonitions in the class president's mind. Along the hallway, a group of boys excitedly discussed new writing ideas revolving around characters with extraordinary superpowers. A friend passionately sketched out a star-crossed romance between a hero and a hidden villain, while Seung-woo kept his usual impassive face. Suddenly, his eyes paused when he caught the familiar figure of Han Serim slowly walking amidst the bustling crowd. Seung-woo secretly wondered if she was only just now showing up to school as he watched Serim's back casually entering the classroom. The friend walking with him couldn't help but be amazed, exclaiming that the third period had ended a long time ago, yet Serim still nonchalantly appeared. Unable to hold back any longer, Seung-woo decisively stepped up to block her way and loudly questioned why Serim had taken it upon herself to ditch school early yesterday. In front of the whole class as witnesses, he strictly reminded her of their promise to cooperate every Wednesday, then softly asked if the words he had said yesterday had really made her feel angry. Serim quietly tilted her face to reveal a bright red slap mark on her cheek as proof of the violence she had just suffered from the outside world. Seung-woo stood blocking the classroom door with a stern look in his eyes, pressing for the reason why she had ditched school early on her own accord like that yesterday. He loudly reiterated the promise to cooperate every Wednesday afternoon, causing the entire class to focus their astonished attention on the two of them. The class president lowered his voice to interrogate if what he had said yesterday had unintentionally made her feel insulted and angry. Under the pale sunlight of the classroom, the wound on the black-haired girl's face appeared even more distinctly, as if boring deep into Seung-woo's restless mind. The male lead was completely dumbfounded upon seeing the injury on his friend's originally delicate face, making all his intentions to scold her suddenly vanish completely. He stepped closer with obvious worry and continuously asked what had happened to her face and whether she had actually been assaulted by someone. Serim slightly curled her lip into a bitter smile, then casually replied that she showed up at school today simply because she didn't have a single penny left to her name. She coldly demanded the class president to mind his own business. Unless he intended to give her money to spend, he should never interfere in her personal life again. Seung-woo silently walked away in utmost confusion, leaving behind his accompanying friend who was still endlessly questioning that bizarre story about money just now. The nameplate for the Level C English class quietly appeared, kicking off a lesson tainted by drama from malicious rumors. Inside the room, a group of boys continuously chatted loudly about Serim's injury, raising questions about whether she had been assaulted because of money debt. One student showed skepticism while looking at a book on the desk, wondering if a big shot in the underworld like Serim shouldn't possess a lot of money. Facing the speculations, the freckled-faced boy lightly crossed his arms with a smug look and loudly asserted that he was the one who knew the real truth of the matter. He turned around to explain to his friends that Serim actually had to submit a large sum of money to her father every month, and she was beaten simply because she didn't meet the quota. Just as the story was reaching its climax, Seung-woo unexpectedly stuck his head through the window and yelled loudly that the other guy must be weaving up some nonsense novel. A glasses-wearing boy didn't forget to chime in with mockery, calling the group of friends losers and demanding them to focus on studying properly. Seung-woo silently left the classroom with a pensive look, as if in his head he was secretly kindling a dark plan targeting the other's weakness. He suddenly returned to the window to press again, in order to verify if the information about Serim experiencing financial difficulties was actually accurate. With eyes full of cunning, Seung-woo firmly asserted that if that was true, then that arrogant girl must be falling into an extreme state of destitution. Serim stood in silence, with a reddish-purple bruise still clearly marked on her cheek, her lifeless eyes staring blankly at the 50,000 won bill being held out in front of her. Seung-woo smugly introduced himself as Seung-woo's friend and casually handed her the money, making Serim inevitably suspicious. As she asked what his intentions were, she immediately chased him away with cold words, demanding the annoying guy in front of her to get lost out of her sight right this instant. However, Seung-woo still refused to give up and continued to play mind games with Serim by asking if Seung-woo actually had a lot of feelings for her. He started throwing out his bait by firmly holding out the bill and laying down the condition that Serim must completely cut all ties with the elite class president. The girl's pitch-black eyes suddenly grew sharp as she coldly reminded him that if he wanted that, the annoying mentoring program had to be terminated as well. Seeing the other party seemingly swayed by materialism, Seung-woo flashed a cunning smile and offered to give another 50,000 won if the current amount wasn't enough to satisfy her. Unexpectedly, Serim slightly smirked in a challenging manner, taking the initiative to demand he hand over even more money to seal this dirty deal. After the dramatic bargaining session, the male student strode down the hallway with a calculating look on his face, leaving behind the observant gazes of his classmates. As soon as he met up with his gang, Seung-woo could only grit his teeth and curse in extreme anger upon realizing he had just been blatantly extorted by that weird girl. Seung-woo was so mad that he clutched the back of his neck, blurting out in disbelief, asking if that crazy girl actually dared to demand a price of 500,000 won. The bell signaling the end of the class echoed across the buildings, temporarily putting on hold the filthy schemes brewing in the wicked male student's heart. Seung-woo walked briskly down the hallway with his friend group, who were eagerly talking about the fragrant curry and urging everyone to hurry to the cafeteria. However, the class president's eyes unconsciously drifted toward the infirmary sign as if searching for a familiar presence. Ignoring his friend's questions about whether he was sick, Seung-woo just quietly stepped inside and asked everyone to go ahead and leave him alone. The classroom space appeared deserted under the brilliant late afternoon sunlight, covering the rows of desks and chairs in a peaceful, shining golden hue. At the window corner, Serim was slumped over the desk, deep in sleep, her long black hair splayed out with her earphones still silently playing, isolating her from the outside world. Seung-woo slowly approached with soft footsteps, as if afraid that even the slightest noise would be enough to startle the slumbering girl. He quietly placed the bag of ointment and bandages on the desk right next to Serim's reach, a silent act of care for the wound on her face. Seung-woo sat down right next to her and quietly observed Serim's peacefully sleeping face under the afternoon sun, an indescribable emotion rising in his heart toward this mysterious friend. Serim tiredly opened one eye while still slumped on the desk, revealing the purplish bruise that was gradually becoming more visible under the fading afternoon sunlight. Seung-woo leaned closer and softly wondered if she wasn't actually listening to music like it appeared on the outside. Looking toward the notice board announcing the upcoming sports festival, he secretly worried that the wound would definitely leave a scar if not treated in time. Holding the first aid kit in his hands, the class president gently asked for permission to help and received an indifferent reply that he could do whatever he wanted. Seung-woo's hand reached out, extremely carefully tucking her raven-black locks of hair to one side so as not to touch the injured skin. In the middle of the classroom flooded with the golden hues of sunset, the class president meticulously used a cotton swab to apply ointment for his friend with a highly concentrated expression. Seeing the girl slightly shiver, Seung-woo hurriedly asked if it stung, but Serim stubbornly denied feeling any pain. He asked in a low voice about the cause, only to be stunned upon hearing her confess that she had just been extorted, a truth completely contrary to the delinquent title everyone had labeled her with. Serim slightly tilted her head with empty eyes and casually confirmed that perhaps she herself was the terrible person the rumors made her out to be. Facing that girl's reckless demeanor, Seung-woo could only observe in silence with sorrowful, pensive eyes about the hidden depths that remained unresolved. Seung-woo asked Serim to try and act a bit more serious while he was struggling with the tube of ointment, but she just indifferently replied that she didn't wanna. The class president's hands skillfully applied the bandage over the bruise on her cheek, a gentle act of care that made the space suddenly become strangely warm. In the sunlit room, Seung-woo softly explained so Serim would understand that his leaving school early yesterday actually had no ill intent. Still maintaining her slumped posture, Serim softly uttered a confirmation that she had originally intended to go through with that study cooperation. The male lead silently directed his gaze out the window, his face showing a deeply thoughtful look regarding the unpredictable developments in this relationship. The rhythmic tapping of Seung-woo's fingers on the desk echoed in the silence, breaking the stifling atmosphere enveloping the two of them. He suddenly reached out his hand and boldly demanded the other party to give him her phone, making Serim bewilderedly look up in question. Seung-woo swiftly entered each number into the contacts under the golden afternoon sunlight, preparing for an important connection between the two of them. He handed the phone back and instructed Serim to save his number, so she could contact him immediately if any incidents occurred. He affirmed that he would always be ready to help whether she got extorted by bad guys or faced any danger whatsoever. The classroom started buzzing under the afternoon sun as the students hurriedly packed up their books to prepare to go home after a long day. A teacher unexpectedly appeared behind the classroom door and called out Han Serim's name to hand over some important paperwork. Seung-woo, who was holding his friend's black backpack in his hands, received a questioning inquiry from the teacher about whether the girl had already left. The teacher then handed him an explanatory form for being late and asked the class president to remind Serim that she absolutely must complete and submit it by tomorrow. Holding the paper in his hands with a deeply pensive gaze, Seung-woo gave a slight nod of confirmation when asked if he had a way to contact the troublesome girl yet. Striding down the street shaded by cherry blossoms, the male lead continuously dialed her number, but the only response he got was long rings in hopeless silence. Just as he turned past a hidden corner of a wall, Seung-woo suddenly stopped when he unexpectedly caught the familiar figure of Serim standing in a secluded spot. He was completely stunned to see Serim, with a bandage on her face, silently handing a large stack of cash to a mysterious man in the shadows. Standing from afar to observe the whole situation, Seung-woo's face clearly showed shock as he realized the dark, hidden corners in his friend's life were gradually being exposed. The thick stack of 50,000 won bills was handed over in silence, like an affirmation of the terrible troubles that Serim was having to endure. Seung-woo hid behind the wall corner with shocked eyes as he heard the mysterious man press Serim on whether she was actually messing with him. Taking a long drag of a cigarette, the strange guy casually affirmed that he was offering her a clear and fair choice. He sat opposite Serim and dropped words of temptation, coaxing her to accept a more comfortable life by his side, even mentioning the promise of an arranged marriage. The thick stack of cash was brought out in the silence, like a cruel trade-off so that Serim could continue to survive in the shadow of this man. At the height of the tension, Seung-woo decisively stepped out to stop the exchange and strongly declared that she wouldn't have to endure anything anymore. The black-haired girl stared in shock at the class president's back, her heart inevitably wavering at the bravely protective action of the person she originally always tried to chase away. The man let out a soft, meaningful exclamation, a sinister smile clearly appearing on his lips as he realized the appearance of an uninvited roadblock. With an arrogant demeanor and sharp eyes, the gangster possessing a long scar on his face coldly asked back to confirm if the opponent was actually Kang Seung-woo. Facing the blatant provocation of the gangster, Seung-woo could only stand frozen with extreme anxiety clearly showing on his face. The silver-haired guy asked him not to glare at him with those fiery eyes because it was obvious that he knew the identity of an elite class president. He stepped closer, leaning in on the male lead, and sarcastically asked what a squeaky clean guy like him really wanted to do to change the current situation. Seung-woo firmly declared that this behavior was illegal involving a minor and pressed him about the sick marriage intention he had just mentioned. With a perverted smile, the man smugly claimed that he was bringing Serim the best path for her future with all sincerity. He turned to look at Serim meaningfully to seek a confirmation of agreement from the girl who was completely helpless under his pressure. Unable to just stand and watch anymore, Seung-woo angrily clenched his fists and questioned whether someone who genuinely cared would ever demand money in such a filthy way. Contrary to expectations, Serim coldly demanded that he get lost right away and never arbitrarily interfere in her troubles ever again. Seung-woo stared blankly at the scene before him, secretly thinking that his sudden appearance unintentionally made him look no different from a villain crashing the party. The silver-haired man casually refused the stack of money and told Serim to just keep it for herself, while announcing that he was about to leave right now. He unexpectedly reached out his hand towards Seung-woo in a provocative manner and didn't forget to drop a promise to meet the teenager again next time. Seung-woo stood rooted to the spot with sharp eyes, unable to hide the terror in his heart as he clearly felt the overwhelming presence from the opponent's hand wearing a sharp spiked ring. The man gave a mysterious half-smile, his eyes holding an unpredictable calculation as he saw through the toughness of the exemplary class president. Patting Seung-woo hard on the shoulder, he uttered a meaningful affirmation that someone like him would definitely go even further in the future. The sound of his footsteps gradually faded away in the small alley, leaving Seung-woo and Serim standing in silence amidst the pressure-filled space. As soon as the stranger disappeared, Seung-woo hurriedly pressed Serim about his true identity and the reason why she had to give money to such a dangerous person. In response to that urgency was only Seung-woo's solemn face, as he began to realize that the troubles his friend was enduring went far beyond all the rumors. He firmly reminded Serim to absolutely keep her distance and never approach weird people, no matter if he was a criminal or whatever else. Serim slightly smirked, reminding Seung-woo that he was still just a minor, so he could definitely escape this mess. Her eyes suddenly became distant as she let out a sigh, saying he was truly an incredibly annoying person before decisively turning her back to leave. At the internet cafe, next to a hot bowl of noodles, malicious gossip started to break out as someone claimed to have witnessed everything with their own eyes. The boys whispered to each other about Serim secretly giving money to a scary tall man and the unexpected intervention by Seung-woo. Amidst the space flooded with LED lights, a friend chimed in that he even saw the two of them going together to some very shady place. A loud slurping sound of broth rang out along with skepticism about whether they were family members, but it was immediately dismissed because their appearances had no similarities. The eyes of the whole group suddenly became full of cunning as the worst theories began to kindle in the mind of each one. Seung-woo smirked triumphantly as he questioned whether that delinquent girl was actually meeting that man purely for money. Night gradually fell, enveloping the brightly lit high-rise buildings, concealing the rumors that were constantly spreading everywhere. Seung-woo stood silently in the middle of a deserted intersection, softly answering the phone that he was right in front of the crossing waiting to be picked up. Seung-woo suddenly paused mid-call, his eyes glued to a familiar figure present at the street corner by night. From behind, he caught sight of Serim sitting all alone at a plastic table in front of a convenience store, swallowed up in the quiet space. The black-haired girl sat silently looking tired, seemingly drowning in sorrowful thoughts without knowing someone was watching. Her eyes suddenly flickered with guarded vigilance as she felt a presence gradually breaking her own tranquility. The male lead strode closer and asked in bewilderment about the reason she was still sitting here absent-mindedly late at night. Seung-woo tilted his head slightly with a highly skeptical look, seemingly trying to find a satisfactory explanation for her strange behavior. The two stood facing each other under the dim streetlights, creating a deeply hidden and equally tense scene between them. He unexpectedly bent down close to Serim and pressed her to see if this already notorious girl was actually sneaking a smoke. Serim looked up with sharp eyes and coldly retorted that it had absolutely nothing to do with his perfect life. Right at this moment, Seung-woo's mother sitting in her car happened to pass by and gasped in complete shock upon catching sight of the scene with her son. Seung-woo's mother narrowed her eyes to observe from afar. She couldn't help but be amazed and secretly wondered if that mysterious black-haired girl was her son's girlfriend. With a heart fluttering with curiosity, she drove slowly toward the convenience store area where the two kids were standing together. Meanwhile, Seung-woo was still strolling leisurely with a deeply thoughtful expression, completely unaware that he had fallen into his mother's sights. He suddenly stopped and turned his head with a bewildered expression upon realizing the unannounced appearance of his family member right at the meeting point. Stepping out of the car with a radiant smile, the friendly mother took the initiative to greet them and asked Serim if she was Seung-woo's friend. Serim looked briefly flustered. She could only cautiously give a brief reply to the sudden warmth from the other's parent. Noticing that the cold night had fallen, she kindly offered to drive the girl all the way home to ensure the safety of a lone schoolgirl. She also excitedly suggested that maybe Serim should drop by their house for some tea and a little more chat to get closer. Seung-woo let out a soft yelp of pain when his mother nudged him hard in the ribs, signaling him to behave politely and agree with the invitation. He hesitantly reminded her that they would have to walk quite a distance from the parking lot to the house, and asked if his friend would mind that. Serim softly spoke up to assert that she was fine in order to soothe the tense atmosphere after the recent encounter. Immediately, Seung-woo told her to wait while he went to see if there were any spare slippers in the trunk. Looking at Serim's feet wearing only socks swallowed up in the night street, the class president couldn't hide his flustered look mixed with a bit of pity. He decided to pick up his own shoes, preparing to perform an extremely chivalrous act for his friend. Seung-woo knelt down and kindly reminded Serim to temporarily wear these shoes even though their shoe sizes were completely different. While Serim was still stunned, he added a sincere piece of advice that she should quit her smoking habit soon. The lights from the high-rise buildings sparkled in the dark night, marking the moment Seung-woo brought Serim back to his family's apartment. As soon as she saw the strange girl's figure, Seung-woo's mother hurriedly asked if she had eaten dinner yet. She urged her son to quickly go to the kitchen and cook something really delicious to treat his starving friend. On the sofa, Seung-woo's father also couldn't hide his surprise at seeing his son bring a friend home for the first time. Seeing Serim so engrossed in observing him, Seung-woo's father burst out laughing, teasing that the little girl was staring so intently she could see right through him, and wittily asked if he was really that handsome. In the slightly awkward atmosphere, he softly asked his son if this pretty schoolgirl was the friend he had mentioned before and received a confirming nod from Seung-woo. To avoid making the guest feel uncomfortable, the thoughtful father immediately took the initiative to say goodbye and went into his room, leaving the private space to the two young people. Just as he turned his back to walk away, Serim happened to brush past Seung-woo's little sister, who was standing and observing from behind with a face full of curiosity. The bespectacled little girl started speaking up, reminding her in an old-soul tone that late-night snacking was inherently not good for health at all. However, Serim still kept her cold face and completely ignored the kid's advice, leaving the little girl frozen in pure shock at the extreme indifference. Seeing his sister seemingly in psychological shock, Seung-woo hurriedly urged Serim to quickly sit at the table to start eating the dinner he had painstakingly prepared. On the table was a plate of piping hot kimchi fried rice topped with an incredibly eye-catching sunny-side-up egg, emanating a delicious aroma that inevitably made one's heart flutter with hunger. Even though Seung-woo was very confident in his cooking skills, Serim only lightly commented that the dish was just okay, making the guy feel a bit disappointed. In the middle of the meal, Seung-woo suddenly changed the subject and wonderingly asked why she was barefoot earlier, while also questioning where her shoes were right now. Seung-woo rested his chin on his hand in suspicion upon hearing Serim nonchalantly say that she had accidentally lost her shoes in a highly inexplicable manner. He advised her to honestly share if she was in danger, under the soul-searching gaze of a true friend. With a serious face, he affirmed that he would definitely lend a hand to help if she truly needed a solid shoulder to lean on right now. In response to that concern, Serim just remained silent with sad eyes, as if trying to bury a secret she couldn't tell anyone. Just as the silence reached its peak, Seung-woo's mother unexpectedly appeared and shattered the tense atmosphere between the two of them. She kindly looked at Serim and suddenly suggested if she wanted to stay the night, since it was already very late. Seung-woo's mother warmly opened a room door and gestured to invite the female student into their family's private space. She firmly stated that Serim could comfortably sleep in Seung-woo's room tonight, leaving both of them completely stunned. Standing behind, the class president was completely petrified, his face clearly showing panic and extreme embarrassment at his mother's bold decision. After calming down a bit, he quietly walked toward the wardrobe and pulled out the wooden drawer, looking for a suitable set of clothes for his friend. While Seung-woo was busy organizing, Serim gently glanced at his back with thoughtful and slightly wary eyes. The space appeared with bookshelves filled with gold trophies and brilliant certificates of merit, a testament to the outstanding teenager's perfect academic record. The study corner was extremely neatly arranged, with a modern computer system under soft lighting, exuding the inherent discipline of the room's owner. On the hanger was the neatly ironed school uniform with a red tie, a symbol of the discipline of an exemplary class president. Serim gently shed her usual spiky demeanor, revealing a tired face and heavy eyes under her mysterious jet-black hair. Seung-woo thoughtfully handed her the prepared black outfit, saying it would fit her, and pointed toward the bathroom on the left side of the hallway so she could wash up. Serim showed an annoyed attitude and firmly asserted that she was very clean, making Seung-woo freeze and sweat. She casually asked if he intended to sleep here with her, suddenly making the atmosphere awkward. The class president squinted tiredly, seemingly fed up with his friend's provocative words. Seung-woo decisively turned his back to walk away, coldly telling her not to say ridiculous things, and left the room immediately. Watching the door close, Serim gave a subtle, triumphant smile at having teased this serious guy. In another room, the bespectacled younger sister was studying intently when she was startled by the forceful opening of the door from behind. Seung-woo walked in carrying a pile of blankets and pillows, looking miserable, announcing that he would sleep here tonight, which greatly shocked the little girl. Ignoring his sister's attempts to shoo him away, he lay down on the floor and didn't forget to remind her that staying up late would prevent her from growing taller. In the dark room, Serim sat quietly in the middle of the bed, the darkness enveloping her small and lonely figure. Her eyes were heavy with sadness and contemplation. It seemed the warmth of this family was touching the spiky girl's heart. In the silent darkness of a strange room, Serim lay curled up on the bed and fell into a fitful sleep surrounded by her thoughts. Outside the window, the lights from the high-rise apartments still flickered under the deep blue night sky, marking the passing of a long, turbulent night. Early the next morning, Seung-woo walked into the kitchen to say good morning and was told by his dad to quickly wake Serim up to get ready for school. The class president approached the familiar door, gently knocking to wake his friend up without startling her. But upon stepping into the room, Seung-woo only saw the empty, neatly made bed, with absolutely no trace of the mysterious girl. He stood dumbfounded looking around the empty space, full of questions and confusion as he realized Serim had quietly left at some unknown time. In the middle of the quiet street in the early morning fog, a pair of feet wearing only thin socks silently walked on the cold pavement of the capital. Serim's gaze was heavy with fatigue and deep sadness, as if she were trying to withdraw into herself after the rapid succession of events. The lonely silhouette of the small girl standing at the crossroads seemed to gradually fade into the fog, taking with it the secret of why she left without shoes. Meanwhile, in the classroom, the homeroom teacher had just finished announcing the end of the morning homeroom session, beginning a new day with instability waiting ahead. The classroom scene opened with an empty desk, accompanied by the teacher's doubtful question about Serim being absent again. The teacher sighed softly and reminded the whole class to focus, while Seung-woo anxiously kept looking back at his friend's seat with a face full of worry. He quietly sent a message asking if anything had happened, but the phone screen remained silent without a single reply from Serim. In the English classroom area, malicious rumors began to erupt about the third-year female students secretly meeting men for money. The group of boys gathered around gossiping excitedly. They couldn't help but be sarcastic about how such a scandalous girl could have a close relationship with the exemplary class president. Just as Seung-woo walked to the room's door, the whisper suddenly became awkward as all eyes focused on the poor boy. The gossipers hastily retracted their contemptuous smiles, only managing to offer fake greetings to cover up their embarrassment. Seung-woo slightly furrowed his brows in confusion at the mocking giggles continuously echoing behind his back. Returning home, he lay on his bed with his phone constantly in hand, exhaustingly waiting for the smallest signal from Serim. He sighed heavily with concern, his mind completely engulfed by the mess and dark secrets that were gradually swallowing that girl. Seung-woo anxiously dialed Serim's number, but the other end of the line remained mysteriously silent. He lay on the bed, listening to the hopeless long beeps with a restless and uneasy mood all night. The subscriber unavailable notification popped up like cold water splashed right in the face of the class president's sincere concern. The next morning, the high school appeared brilliantly under the spring sun, but the atmosphere was extremely heavy for Seung-woo. He walked down the hallway, his face clearly showing fatigue and his eyes heavy after a long, sleepless night. While lost in thought, Seung-woo suddenly startled and stopped when he caught a glimpse of a familiar figure at the end of the classroom block. Realizing it was Serim, he immediately called out her name loudly, making the quiet space suddenly bustling. Seung-woo hurriedly chased after her, pressing her for the reason why she left yesterday, without a word of goodbye, and why she ignored all his calls. In response to that eagerness was only an icy stare and a decisive demand that he stop bothering her and stop talking to her. With a heavy face, he quietly asked if there was anything at his house that made her uncomfortable, asserting that he was just truly worried about her. Serim glared intensely at him and demanded to know who Seung-woo thought he was to dare interfere in her personal affairs. Without waiting for an answer, she decisively turned her back and walked away, accompanied by a cold reminder that he should mind his own business. Standing silently in the hallway, the class president gently looked up and sighed, secretly wondering what kind of problem this friend was actually facing. The school cafeteria scene appeared bustling with laughter and long lines of students waiting to get their lunch portions. In the midst of that lively space, Serim chose a hidden corner for herself and quietly ate her meal in her inherent solitude. At the opposite table, although Seung-woo was holding his chopsticks, his mind and eyes were constantly glued to the lonely figure of the black-haired girl. Noticing the anomaly, his best friend whispered in his ear asking if the two had just argued, but he immediately denied it and affirmed that there was essentially no connection between them. However, the whispering and gossiping of the surrounding friends continued to erupt. They firmly believed that the relationship between the two had just developed a rift. Seung-woo slightly furrowed his brows in fatigue at having to endure the scrutinizing looks and the bunch of nonsense rumors surrounding him. He fell silent with a determined look in his eyes, as if secretly resolving to find out the truth behind Serim's spiky and mysterious exterior. Serim sat quietly in the middle of the cafeteria, her deep black eyes silently observing the group of girls who were incessantly whispering and gossiping about her. On the other side, Seung-woo's bespectacled friend looked extremely serious when he caught the scrutinizing gazes directed at the class president. He hastily suggested that they quickly finish lunch to find a private place to talk to avoid the crowd's attention. The setting quickly shifted to the deserted staircase area, where the echo of a confrontation about the existence of the rumors began to erupt. In a tiredly bowed head posture, Seung-woo listened to his friend assert that even though the dating rumors were fake, students from other classes completely believed them. The class president's eyes suddenly became sharp with resentment. He pressed to ask if the person behind this dirty trick was that bastard Jo Seung-woo. Meanwhile, Jo Seung-woo and his cronies were laughing gleefully right on top of the desks, as if celebrating a victory after framing a classmate. The chaotic atmosphere suddenly froze when Seung-woo unexpectedly appeared at the classroom door with a cold face and an authoritative knock on the door. He stood tall in the aisle, his gaze pinned straight at his enemy, and then issued a command demanding Jo Seung-woo step outside to settle this once and for all. The late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows on the rows of empty desks and chairs, signaling a fiery confrontation about to break out between two completely opposite extremes. Seung-woo stood in the middle of the sunlit classroom, directly confronting and questioning Jo Seung-woo whether the person behind the recent bizarre rumors was him. In response to that resolve, the male student maintained a challenging smirk and arrogantly asked back if the class president had any evidence to accuse an innocent person. Tensions escalated as Seung-woo warned his opponent to be careful with his words, while Seung-woo sarcastically mocked him for trying so hard to protect his ruined girlfriend. Realizing that the classmate still refused to repent, the class president brought up the dark past when he was caught red-handed for similar despicable actions targeted at him. It was the incident in middle school where he was framed for peeking at the exam paper, which took him 3 grueling months to clear his name, even though the guy had pathetically admitted he misunderstood at the time. With an overwhelming posture, Seung-woo looked deep into his opponent's soul and bluntly asked if this bastard harbored severe jealousy and an inferiority complex towards him. The words hit a nerve, causing Seung-woo to explode and scream out of control, despite Seung-woo lowering his voice and demanding he stop while he was still being nice. The space suddenly became suffocating as the class president stood closer, his sharp eyes radiating extreme murderous intent along with a steel warning forcing the opponent to watch his mouth. The uncontrollable anger led to a violent act when a red bucket was forcefully kicked away, accompanied by hateful curses directed at the despicable guy. The scene ended in the cold corner of the restroom, where Seung-woo stood petrified amid the water-splattered floor, trembling as he faced the complete collapse of his pathetic ego. Serim gave a calculating smirk as she reached out, demanding Jo Seung-woo pay more money to end their secret deal. In response was the male student's face distorted by pressure. He forced a tight smile while sweating profusely out of sheer bitterness. In a sunlit corner of a coffee shop, endless words of praise echoed about Seung-woo's latest achievement in the recent math competition. His mother held her glass of water with an extremely smug look, claiming that the number of her son's certificates of merit was so high there was no room left to store them. The woman sitting opposite cleverly responded to the boasting by mentioning that her daughter, Yi-ji, had also just finished her exams with great effort. The mother did not hesitate to express her wish that her son should look for a gentle partner like Yi-ji instead of girls with overly strong personalities. She even tilted her chin arrogantly, declaring that anyone who wanted to date Seung-woo must know their place and wait patiently. The atmosphere suddenly changed when the younger woman excitedly waved to welcome a special figure who had just appeared at the cafe's entrance. With an elegant demeanor, Seung-woo's mother smiled and approached while everyone was buzzing about how her son had just taken first place in the entire school. The younger woman quickly signaled to keep it a secret, whispering that because Seung-woo only ranked second, his mother was furious and trying to track down the identity of the person who outperformed her son. Amidst the afternoon tea, Seung-woo's mother smiled proudly, asserting that her son always had enough capability to handle his own preparation for the upcoming exams. She maintained an extremely open-minded attitude, considering it completely natural for Seung-woo to have a girlfriend at this passionate, youthful age. On the contrary, Seong-woo's mother looked displeased and pressed to ask if she could truly accept her son associating with a scandalous girl. The atmosphere suddenly became stifling when the younger woman sitting nearby revealed the malicious rumor that the girl specialized in meeting men in exchange for money. Seong-woo's mother's face briefly showed a hint of shock upon realizing that the target these people were aiming at was none other than the young girl Serim. She immediately displayed her sharpness by questioning back whether Seong-woo had actually seen it with his own eyes or was just listening to baseless rumors. Faced with a courageous pushback, the other woman stammered to explain that it was just talk spreading all over the school and her son had only heard about it secondhand. The sound of the coffee cup being placed on the saucer rang out firmly, like a definitive end to the malicious gossip aimed at an absent person. Seong-woo's mother bluntly warned that imposing harsh words on a young girl was an extremely unethical and dangerous act. She firmly asserted that young children might foolishly believe sensational rumors, but adults must absolutely maintain their sanity and fairness. The quiet night fell, enveloping the high-rise apartments, bringing along a somber and highly contemplative atmosphere. Seong-woo lay on his bed, his eyes glued to the phone screen until an unexpected knock on the door shattered the silence. His mother walked in with a worried expression. She gently sat down next to her son and anxiously asked if everything was really okay with Serim. The class president's eyes suddenly showed a hint of confusion when asking the reason for his mother's sudden concern, only to receive the confession that she was simply feeling uneasy for the girl. In the quiet space of the room, the mother caringly advised her son to try his best to look after and take good care of this new friend. Seong-woo sighed softly as he explained that Serim was in big trouble due to misunderstandings about the two of them dating, yet she always stubbornly asked him not to intervene. His face suddenly turned serious when mentioning that the malicious rumors about Serim meeting strange men for money were tarnishing her reputation. Hearing her son's explanation, the mother nodded in understanding and firmly stated that she herself knew very well that all of it was just a cheap fabrication. She looked away with a sense of pity, deducing that hidden behind that spiky exterior and sharp words must be a soul suffering from deep wounds and extreme loneliness. The scene ended with the mother's agonizing question about whether Serim had any close friends at school, leaving Seong-woo in silence with a sad face. Seong-woo gently sighed as he promised his mother that he would proactively talk to Serim tomorrow, making her feel extremely reassured and proud of her son's maturity. The radiant morning sunlight enveloped the high school amidst the blooming cherry blossom season, kicking off a turbulent new day. A decisive footstep echoed as the class president's sneakers suddenly stopped in front of the stubborn friend right in the middle of the schoolyard. He resolutely blocked her path and suggested that they both take some time to have a serious talk about the recent troubles. Serim maintained her cold attitude, about to walk away, forcing Seong-woo to press whether it was because of the malicious rumors that she was acting so distant. He hurriedly explained that the rumor spreader was just basing it on a misunderstanding and kept apologizing while trying to catch up with her retreating back. The class president earnestly promised to clear everything up to restore her innocence, but Serim suddenly stopped and calmly asserted that everything was true. With a mysterious smile tinged with sarcasm, she looked straight into his eyes and confirmed that the rumor about her meeting strange men for money was not fabricated at all. Seong-woo, appalled, begged her not to utter words that demeaned herself, but Serim merely asked back whether his perfect world had any room for such cruel realities. With a tough face and a stern look, he asserted that the issue wasn't about perfection, but because it was illegal since she was still a minor. Serim squinted, staring deep into Seong-woo's mind, and contemptuously asked why he always kept such a skewed attitude by trying to act so saintly. Standing beneath the shower of cherry blossoms, Seong-woo was stunned to hear the girl in front of him voice her desire to be born again to cast off reality. Serim gently smoothed her hair back, flashing a half-smile that was both fragile and deeply defiant in the face of the class president's extreme confusion. Returning to reality on the cold stone bench, Seong-woo sat in a daze, his feet in slippers still trembling from the recent confession. He tried to focus to regain his usual composure, but Serim's deeply melancholic voice kept clinging to his mind. Once again, the image of the lonely girl in the dark corner reappeared in Seong-woo's mind, accompanied by her firm assertion of wanting to start her life over. The class president held his head in agony, tormenting himself as he realized he had already sunk too deep into the dark corners of Han Serim's life. He looked up at the sky and let out a breathless sigh of helplessness, secretly admitting to himself that the girl's presence was truly turning everything upside down. Meanwhile, Jo Seung-woo was standing awkwardly in front of class 2-3, constantly biting his nails in extreme fear of an impending punishment. He turned his head in startlement, his face pale with tension, watching Seung-woo's cold back gradually disappear at the end of the hallway. Jo Seung-woo stealthily observed the deserted hallway around him, secretly harboring a malicious plan to tear the young couple apart. He approached the classroom door, aggressively ordering a female student to immediately call Han Serim out for a private talk. As soon as he saw Serim's figure, the despicable boy hurriedly held out an envelope containing 500,000 won as a dirty exchange. Serim quietly looked down at the stack of cash in his hand, her face remaining devoid of any emotion towards the highly materialistic offer. Seung-woo glared, threatening Serim to take the money and disappear from Seung-woo's life, simultaneously forbidding her from ever pretending to know him again. In response to that madness, the black-haired girl just calmly asked back that if they really weren't dating, didn't she have the right to take it? Serim's bizarre calmness left Seung-woo momentarily stunned. He hadn't expected her to accept the deal so easily. Suddenly, Serim declared that she had changed her mind and demanded he fork over a full 1 million won if he wanted her to follow his exact plan. The boy let out a sarcastic laugh, endlessly insulting Serim for being a money-grubbing lunatic for daring to ask for such an exorbitant price. Serim's eyes suddenly grew deep with bitterness. She secretly felt envious that life, for people like him, must be so easy. Serim brushed past the despicable boy with a look of extreme contempt, throwing out a stinging insult that his actions made her feel utterly disgusted. She strode quickly across the sunlit schoolyard, constantly ruffling her hair, as if trying to dispel the frustration that was creeping into her mind. From a sharp side profile, Serim sighed softly, her face tinged with sadness and a hint of fatigue after the calculating exchanges she had just endured. The solitary footsteps echoed along the school hallway like an affirmation of the black-haired girl's isolated lifestyle from the rest of the world. At the gymnasium, the teacher abruptly ordered the class representative for the subject to follow him immediately to sort out some work, breaking the training atmosphere. Seung-woo looked back in shock, his eyes clearly showing confusion mixed with anxiety as he had a premonition that a new trouble was about to strike. He walked aimlessly down the quiet hallway, constantly tearing at his hair in unending agony over Serim's harsh reality. The class president's face suddenly grew extremely tense. He looked back over his shoulder with troubled eyes as if searching for an answer for himself. Meanwhile, the group of boys was gathering and laughing gleefully right on the wooden floor, completely unaware of the massive storm that was steadily approaching. The atmosphere suddenly exploded with a terrifying noise when Serim appeared towering at the entrance, throwing out a powerful challenge aimed directly at the crowd. Serim's slender but forceful hand suddenly gripped the iron bar of the folding chair tightly, signaling an irredeemable fury. A dry crushing sound echoed as Jo Seung-woo tumbled onto the wooden floor, his face distorted in terror at the impending punishment. The girl with disheveled black hair stood towering like a demon, forcefully swinging the iron chair and causing fresh blood to splatter across the floor as a brutal warning. Jo Seung-woo tumbled to the gymnasium floor in a pathetic state after a harsh impact. He clutched his heavily bleeding head, his face contorted in pain and disbelief at what was happening. In a frenzy, he screamed and cursed at Serim, calling her a crazy bitch as he saw the iron chair swinging straight toward him. The surrounding students stood frozen in terror, repeatedly screaming for Serim to stop immediately. Seung-woo fearfully admitted to being the one who spread the malicious rumors and promised to give her 1 million won to escape punishment. He screamed in despair that he had already apologized, but Serim only replied with a cold question asking if he thought things would be that easy. Her eyes were filled with murderous intent as she roared in fury and raised the iron chair high into the air, preparing for a fatal blow. The iron chair struck hard, causing fresh blood to splatter into the air, marking the complete downfall of the arrogant fool. The female students witnessing the violent scene could only cover their mouths in stunned silence, unable to believe the cruelty of the black-haired girl. Seung-woo stood frozen, his hair falling to cover his eyes, seemingly sinking into a terrifying silence after witnessing everything. The bright sunlight shone directly onto Seung-woo's cold face, where blood was trickling down his forehead as proof of the chaos that had just unfolded. Facing him was Serim, standing completely still in the middle of the gym, breathing heavily with shocked eyes as if she hadn't yet snapped out of her violent frenzy. Without a moment of hesitation, he rushed forward and firmly grabbed the frame of the iron chair she was holding to prevent any further foolish actions from breaking out. The authoritative intervention of the class president created a suffocating silence at the scene, where the other students could only watch in fear. Ignoring Serim's fierce struggles and screams demanding him to let go, he resolutely gripped her wrist to drag her away from the prying eyes. The black-haired girl's desperate screams of resistance echoed throughout the vast gym, signaling a deep rift that would be hard to mend. The door of the empty room slammed shut with a harsh sound, marking the beginning of a tense, private confrontation between the two. As soon as they stepped inside, Serim frantically slammed her hands on the table and threatened him not to get in her way or meddle in her personal affairs ever again. But Seung-woo didn't back down. He looked straight at her with his bloodied face and yelled, asking if she truly understood the magnitude of the disaster she had just caused. He knelt before the girl sitting on the chair, gently holding her trembling hands to calm her down, and explained that if the blow had hit a vital spot, a real tragedy would have occurred. Serim cried out in sheer frustration that the bastard was the one who started everything, her face showing uncontrollable anger at the injustices she had just endured. Facing that fury, Seung-woo firmly held her trembling hands and promised that he would personally step up to resolve the malicious rumors Seung-woo had spread. He sternly warned her to stop using her fists immediately, because it was wrong, and she would be the one to suffer the most if the school disciplinary committee got involved. In the quiet space of the art room, Serim tearfully repeated the guy's insults, how he dared to trivialize her turbulent life as something easy. Seung-woo couldn't help but be appalled by those vicious insults, wondering how a guy like him could utter such thoughtless words that hurt others so deeply. To soothe her shattered soul, he tightly squeezed her small hands and reiterated his assertion that Seung-woo was the one completely in the wrong. The class president patiently continued to advise her that violence is never the key to solving problems, regardless of how resentful and angry she was feeling. He reminded her of her desire to start over, affirming that all her current efforts were proof of her genuine wish to change herself. Looking deep into Serim's tearful eyes, he gently asked once again to confirm whether she truly wanted to shake off the past and move forward. The atmosphere was suddenly torn apart when a strange man in a blue hoodie unexpectedly kicked the door open, fiercely yelling and demanding her to come out and face him right then. On the cold medical tray, the first aid tools lay still, ready to treat the class president's newly acquired wound. The nurse gently applied a gauze pad to Seung-woo's forehead and reminded him that even though it was just a minor scratch, he still needed to visit the hospital for a more thorough checkup. While the nurse was busy preparing to leave, Seung-woo stubbornly insisted he was fine and didn't forget to ask about Jo Seung-woo's condition after the brawl. Right then, a friend walked into the infirmary and informed him that the guy had been taken straight to the emergency room, so he didn't need to worry too much. The friend approached to ask about the situation, feeling shocked upon hearing Seung-woo explain that he had deliberately thrown himself in to stop it, and that it was entirely not Serim's fault. Witnessing his friend's relentless protective attitude, the friend could only sigh and admit that he truly couldn't understand the class president's mindset right now. Glancing at the pile of medical tools, the friend brought up the fact that Seung-woo was normally an extremely organized and disciplined person who never let troublesome matters bother him. The friend argued that even if he didn't want to give up the mentorship program, Seung-woo getting this deeply involved for Han Serim was going way too far. Faced with the suspicious questioning of whether he was genuinely developing feelings for that troublesome girl, Seung-woo just silently bowed his head, deep in thought. With his hands tightly clasped together in extreme confusion, the class president silently admitted to himself that for some reason, he truly couldn't stop worrying about her. Watching the falling petals, Seung-woo quietly thought that Serim's figure was so fragile, like an existence that always needed someone by her side to protect her. In the infirmary, his best friend advised him not to intervene too deeply, because the girl herself had asked him to stay out of her personal business. Seung-woo held his face in torment, struggling with himself, and realized that his heart truly couldn't just give up on this troublesome girl. The school corridor was silent under the afternoon sun, seemingly signaling a fateful encounter that was about to take place. He trudged down the long hallway, his mind still unable to escape the overlapping thoughts about his classmates' secrets. Suddenly, a pair of black shoes blocked Seung-woo's path, accompanied by an ambiguous greeting that the two had finally reunited. The blonde gangster appeared with a sinister smile, arrogantly forcing him to point the way to the teacher's office immediately. Meanwhile, from the teacher's office, harsh scoldings echoed regarding Serim's undisciplined habit of arriving late and leaving early. The teacher yelled in utter shock upon learning that the already problematic female student was now involved in a serious, violent brawl. Serim could only silently bow her head in resignation at the threat that this foolish action would take her straight to the school's disciplinary committee. Serim stood in the office with her head bowed in remorse, softly muttering a belated apology for the trouble she had caused. But the teacher didn't seem to calm down at all. She yelled harshly that an empty apology could never clean up this mess. Upon hearing the teacher mention how heartbroken her parents would be if they found out, Serim suddenly let out a faint, bitter smile. In the quiet space, she casually declared a shocking truth. She no longer had any parents left in this world. She coldly stated that they had passed away a long time ago, leaving the person opposite her frozen in shock at the incredibly sudden confession. Despite the teacher's suspicion and accusations of lying, Serim gritted her teeth and reiterated her parents' deaths as a choked-up, definitive affirmation. The furious teacher slammed her hand on the table and strictly interrogated her about the true identity of the person listed as her emergency contact. Serim's eyes suddenly wavered with unease upon hearing the teacher announce that she had actually called that mysterious guardian to the school. Just then, the silhouette of a strange man with an overwhelmingly dominant presence unexpectedly strode into the teacher's office. He offered a greeting and confirmed he came in response to the call, leaving Serim entirely stunned, her face showing pure terror. The strange man with rugged silver-white hair casually declared himself to be Serim's guardian, to everyone's astonishment. He stood in the middle of the schoolyard, narrowing his eyes in suspicion as he brought up the vicious rumor that Serim frequently met strange men just for money. He let out a faint, mocking laugh at the absurdity of the rumor, then suddenly wondered aloud if the mysterious man in that fabricated story might actually be him. Seung-woo stood across from him with a conflicted face, secretly worrying that Serim would absolutely lose her mind if she knew these sensitive words were being discussed. The man suddenly paused, his probing gaze drilling into Seung-woo as he curiously repeated the intimate way of address the class president had accidentally let slip. He offered his sincere thanks for Seung-woo sharing the information, while firmly stating that poor Serim must have certainly suffered a lot of injustice. Without a second thought, he pulled out 2 high-denomination bills and held them out to Seung-woo as a thank-you gift for the troubles the boy had to endure. The class president could only stand frozen, staring at the cash in front of him, his face showing a stern expression mixed with confusion at the man's actions. The guardian suddenly leaned in low to close the distance and subtly interrogated him about what his real relationship with Serim was. He slowly opened his luxurious wallet while smirking, asserting that he was only willing to say these things because he saw Seung-woo as a decent kid. The silver-haired guardian leaned in close to Seung-woo, dropping a volatile warning that he'd better stay away and not meddle in anything concerning Serim. He casually turned his back and strode away with a defiant goodbye, leaving the class president standing silently in the schoolyard, surrounded by countless doubts. Seung-woo pensively watched that mysterious figure, his face clearly showing worry as he realized that the troubles surrounding Serim were gradually becoming more complex and unpredictable. In the teacher's office, the strange man with a nonchalant demeanor stood facing the astonished teacher, creating an oppressive atmosphere that engulfed Serim. He lightly smirked and explained that he wasn't her father, but rather an older brother or a direct guardian stepping up to vouch for his troublesome little sister. Not stopping there, he also demanded the teacher call the conflicting student out immediately so he could confront him and settle everything once and for all. Outside in the hallway, the rapid clicking of high heels striking the floor echoed loudly, signaling a dramatic appearance about to take place. Jo Seung-gyu's mother stormed furiously alongside her son, screaming like a madwoman, demanding to drag Serim out to settle the score for the wound on her precious son's head. Right as she arrived at the door of class 2 to 3, she aggressively grabbed a random female student's hair to interrogate her, making the terrified girl cry out and deny being the one they were looking for. Seung-woo stood cowardly by the side, pointing things out for his mother, while she continued to shout loudly, demanding Serim show herself immediately to face her wrath. Serim trudged down the classroom hallway while venomous insults aimed directly at her began to echo with mocking tones. Seung-woo's mother aggressively blocked her path, pointed a finger at the troublesome schoolgirl's face, and scolded Serim for being a deceitful type just as the rumors had spread. She stepped closer and questioned with extreme contempt why she dared to have the audacity to smash her precious son's head open. Faced with the fierce accusation of attempted murder, Serim could only endure the wrath raining down on her in the middle of the crowd in silence. Standing behind his mother's protection, Seung-woo flashed a despicable, smug smile upon hearing the demand for Serim to immediately call her parents to apologize. The domineering middle-aged woman kept shouting for her family to see how they raised their child, while a tall figure was quietly approaching. The atmosphere suddenly froze as the silver-haired guardian unexpectedly interrupted, demanding she speak directly with him instead of giving the little girl a hard time. He let out a mysterious smirk and casually introduced himself as Serim's only legal guardian at the moment. Upon seeing the strange man's face, Seung-woo immediately paled and let out a trembling gasp of shock, as if he had recognized the other person's true identity. The silver-haired man suddenly bowed deeply in a formal gesture of apology, acknowledging Serim's mistake and declaring she would accept any appropriate punishment. Seung-woo's mother yelled out dominantly, asserting that Serim naturally had to pay a steep price for the recent violent act. But the silver-haired guardian suddenly leaned in, whispering a cold reminder that both sides still had a few old debts left to settle. He calmly raised the question of whether her son was truly innocent, or if he too deserved an unforgettable lesson. While the stunned woman barked out a question demanding the reason for punishment, Seung-woo stood by her side, beginning to tremble and sweat profusely under the immense pressure. The stranger leaned close to the mother's ear, growling as he exposed the fact that her precious son was the one who spread the malicious rumor about Serim dating random men for money. He directed a piercing gaze at Seung-woo, reproaching the male student for having the heart to ruthlessly trample on a peer's honor. Even as she stubbornly argued that there's no smoke without fire, the guardian firmly demanded she reflect on her own way of educating her child. The silver-haired man brushed past the mother, who was turning pale with terror, his suggestive half-smile instantly making the atmosphere suffocating. The school hallway suddenly plunged into a gloomy darkness as a series of tough-looking henchmen silently appeared behind Serim like a warning reeking of gunpowder. He towered overwhelmingly over the cowardly schoolboy, sarcastically calling him a kid and asking if he wanted to step up in his mother's place to shoulder all the consequences. The silver-haired man leaned close to Seung-woo, harshly affirming that he knew every detail about the class and name of the punk who had just dared to insult Serim. Seung-woo absent-mindedly paced through the schoolyard under the brilliant cherry blossoms, but his heart was heavy with thoughts about the recent incident. His eyes suddenly turned incredibly sharp, silently commanding himself to decisively put an end to all the troubles surrounding him. In the distance, Seung-woo's mother haughtily cursed the other party as a gangster, then hurriedly dragged her son away to escape the terrifying pressure. The class president silently watched the retreating backs of the mother and son, his face clearly showing his torment over the school's dangerous hidden corners. Standing in the middle of an empty stairwell, the guardian casually asked Serim if everything was settled after witnessing her dare to strike someone. Serim desperately begged him to keep this a secret, only to receive a mocking remark about whether she was trembling in fear of the consequences. The little girl bowed her head in silence, her sorrowful eyes mixed with a hint of resentment as she had to face the man who always held all her secrets. The silver-haired man narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing Serim's every minor expression, seemingly trying to find a crack in her already hardened soul. The harsh sound of car doors locking echoed through the quiet space, signaling a mysterious retreat right after the commotion they had just caused. The silver-haired guardian sat in the luxury car, casually checking his phone while notification chimes rang continuously. He answered the call in a deep, low voice, explaining that the school was just worried because Serim frequently skipped out early. With a sharp gaze, The guardian ordered the person on the other end to immediately stop calling her out on a whim to bother her. He firmly stated that their only goal right now was to help the little girl at least manage to complete her graduation. The high school stood tall under the afternoon sun, seemingly trying to hide the dangerous corners that had just been exposed. Seung-woo quietly walked into the classroom amid curious stares and a barrage of questions from his friends about the result of the confrontation. The weary class president announced that there would be no disciplinary committee held because the victim's side had unexpectedly refused that request. While busy taking notes, he received a worried question from the friend next to him about Serim's impending future. The group of boys whispered and gossiped about her punishment of a 10-day suspension accompanied by community service, simultaneously warning each other to watch their mouths due to the appearance of the gangsters. The conversation suddenly shifted its focus to Kang Seung-woo as his friends began to wonder about his real role in this whole mess. Serim's backpack still hung silently by her desk, like a reminder of a special request for help that the homeroom teacher had given the class president. Seung-woo slung his bag over his shoulder and walked quickly past the crowded rows of houses, quietly carrying out the mission to return items to his suspended friend. He focused on the map app on his phone, trying to accurately locate the house address hidden deep within the narrow alleys. In his mind, he could still hear the teacher's instructions about Serim leaving her stuff behind and the belief that only Seung-woo was truly her friend. Just as he turned into the correct pathway according to the directions, Seung-woo suddenly stopped in his tracks upon seeing Serim hugging a basket full of clothes in the golden, dry sunlight. The male lead's decisive footsteps approaching made the little girl, who was absorbed in her chores, stop in astonishment. Serim peeked her small face out from behind the laundry basket, her large, round eyes showing clear amazement at the presence of the top student right in front of her. Without letting the other party react, Seung-woo's firm hands reached out to take the burden from his classmate. Under the blazing sunset, the class president decisively took the heavy basket, creating a strange silence between the two who were usually so distant. A cherry blossom branch trembled slightly in the wind with petals beginning to fall, much like a gentle new beginning budding in both their hearts. Serim silently strode forward, the little girl's figure seemingly lost in her own thoughts amidst the red brick street. Following closely behind was Seung-woo, silently holding the heavy laundry basket to help ease his friend's chore burden. Under the golden sunset dyeing the narrow alleyway, the silhouettes of the two walking side by side created a rare moment of peace after the successive incidents.